All right, ladies and gentlemen, very exciting time. We are through the best ball regular season. I had on, I don't know, 9 or 10 guests over the season, invited anyone who was free to jump on tonight. We got 4 gentlemen backstage at the moment. Excited to hear largely their takeaways from the season. Going to be focusing a lot on whatever lessons we learned this year. Some players we're excited about. If there's time, we'll look at our favorite teams. So let's get to this. What is up, everybody? Today we have on Nez, Justin Herzig, and Neil of Stokastic. How's everyone doing? How did the best ball season treat you?
I don't know if I should speak first because I definitely did not have the results that some of the folks on this stream had, but I had a very average best ball season. I went heavier than I did last season, but my advance rates are on par, and I have some monsters that are in the waking for the playoffs. So we should have some finals teams to sweat over. But these guys I know have been crushing it in the regular season.
I mean, I think how a season's gone, like we don't know, right? Like the guy who won the regular season prize. Shout out to him. We're going to take a look at that, of course, to kick off. I think he did that on 5 bullets, and it was his 5th bullet that took down the contest. The guy who got second, I think, in BBM4 did that on 1 bullet, I believe it was. So, no one's season has been set in stone yet, no matter what your advance rates are out there, no matter what, advance rates require a lot of context, but yeah, excited to get into it if anyone else wants to take it off.
Yeah, I'll say no one's upside has been set in stone yet, but at least with the new change to the underdog having a third of the BBM paid out for regular season, it's nice already being profitable no matter what. So now, even if all my uncorrelated teams just get bounced in round 1 of the playoffs, it's profits.
I mean, that's for sure. Yeah, locking in, people view this differently, and it's why it's nice having everyone here. Some people really want to lock in a profit here. And I definitely want to, after we get through the intros, talk through some things we just have to remind people yearly about, how things work on DraftKings. We're going to talk a little bit about DraftKings as well, as far as, you're going to have tickets, and they come in, you can't see the groups, whatever. We'll get to all of that. Yeah.
So I want to jump in because Nez, Nez is a good spirit. Nez understands the larger aspects of the game. Nez came in here with not the best advance rate, but a good larger spirit and such. Granted, he's coming back from Miami at the Dog Bowl, so that makes sense. But I do want to say, if you were on Twitter today and you did not have the best advance rate, it probably felt effing miserable. And I want to throw out first off, there's a bias for the people who did well are the ones who are posting. It's not that every single person has these higher advance rates, because literally only people were posting it. They pretty much had higher than advance rate in certain things. So if you don't, that is perfectly okay. The second is when you do see people who have these 35, 40%, and I know Justin's pretty high up there, but this falls into it. Those high advance rates, it's not because they are quote unquote better at best ball or you did something wrong. They probably had a pretty tightly target distribution of who they were drafting. So they're drafting ownership. And so for this year, it may have been luck. It may have been they have great takes. Justin, very smart, probably had a lot of actual player takes that led to those. But you also will see people who had 1, 2, 3, 4% advance rates because they also went with a very tight core and it did not work out. And on a yearly basis, a lot of it is luck, definitely some injury, definitely some skill aspects. So but I just want to say, if you are feeling dejected because you did not have the best advance rate, this doesn't mean that you're bad at it, that you shouldn't come back next year, but maybe there are things you can learn and kind of assess and such. But I feel like that's something I was thinking about as I was going through Twitter today, and just a little bit of cesspool of all these high advance rate bros.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Really want to dive into your point once we hear from Neil, of course, because you said a lot there, and there's a lot to debrief there.
Yeah, no, that was a really good point from Justin, that it is, advance rate isn't everything. I'm realizing as I'm talking, I'm the only person here who has not won significant money already on Best Ball. We have 2 Best Ball Mania champs. We've got a Dog Bowl participant. And then, of course, Justin McMahon absolutely crushed the regular season. So I've had a couple in the finals, but none of them did too well. So impressive group we've got here. But yeah, I think, as somebody who spreads out my ownership, I have kind of a standard. I want to get to at least like 20% advance rate, but like I'm never going to get to the advance rate that Justin McMahon has, for example, just based on I'm so spread out with my ownership. I'm not never getting to like 30% exposure to one player, like Raheem Mostert, who's going to carry you through the season, or Kyron Williams. Several top pros had a ton of Kyron Williams this year and have great advance rates as a result. So that is a good point, that the more you spread out your exposure, the more you're probably sacrificing in terms of upside, in terms of advance rate. You can maybe get a good floor there, which is sort of, I guess, my game is I don't really have a ton of player takes. I'm really spreading out my exposures, trying to build structurally sound teams, and then I assume that in general there's enough bad players I'm going to have better than average advance rates this year. Just barely better than average. So even with my nice floor there, I think I kind of hit my floor. Not really. I was still slightly above average. Certainly, you can get below average even the way I'm playing. But not my best season in best ball this year. So I'm probably not going to catch you guys with the 5, 6, 7-figure wins this year, sadly. But it was a fun year.
Well, I think I'm uniquely qualified to talk on some of this advance rate stuff because this is my best advance rate year. The year I won BBM2, I had 19 bullets. So expected is 25. So I was a below advance rate player, right? Last year, I can't quite remember. I think I also was like 22 teams. So I was slightly a below advance rate player. But, your advance rates does not tell a full story there. I think advance rate what it speaks to a lot is kind of like contest selection, which if you play poker or another gambling game, you're familiar with. Contest selection is huge, right? Like we just saw this guy from the Jaguars punt off $22 million or something like that on FanDuel. That speaks to contest selection, right? If you're in the contest with that guy, in general, it's just plus EV, right? And so, drafting late August is kind of a contest selection strategy where you're going to be drafting into guys who don't know what they're doing. You have better info, but it's a little bit more unique than best ball at least is than like a game of poker, because in May, maybe you're facing tougher people, but also maybe you're building teams you can no longer build. And on the Kyron Williams selection discussion, in Underdog, I spread out all my teams. I drafted some early, I drafted some middle, I drafted some late. It was just kind of like one at a time. It was something I enjoyed doing, so I would do it like watching a movie, whatever. The DraftKings Millie, I straight up did not want to do. A, it is a lottery size contest. It's like unrealistic we win. B, it's terrible UI, whatever. So I saved all of my bullets for late August, actually late September, or early September, like the last couple of days. And I drafted like as much Kyron Williams as I could. So it can be as binary as that, where me having the player take of I want Kyron because I will take heavy exposures worked out. Now, it is predictive that we will have an information edge in best ball year over year the later we draft, but how impactful that information is not sticky to me, right? Some years we're going to draft Kyron Williams in May. Like we're just going to be like, this is the Rams RB2. And some years Puka Nacua doesn't just pop out of nowhere because Kupp gets injured, right? So there's a lot of nuance to all this stuff. And it's why I'm happy we're talking about it.
I think that's a good point when you talk about timing, because I think some people may look at this season and the same way they look at all the QB injuries and say, oh, I'm only drafting late this year because I have the information edge. And like the same way that we will look at the results of all the quarterback injuries and say, okay, well, now I have to go 3 QB because certainly that'll happen again. And it's funny. I mean, what I think my takeaway is I was pretty evenly distributed this season. I did a lot of the different underdog tournaments. I didn't max BBM because they had the Chow Chow, the Pitbull, all these other nice like medium to high stakes that I played in. And it's funny because those happen at different points in the off season. And I bricked some of these tournaments in the mid season, but had better success in the later and the early. So, I mean, for me, that's just that could change no matter like what the off season, that could change next season. the timing and the success I had. But it is just kind of interesting to be able to see that in my results and know when a tournament dropped and how I did at that point in the off season.
I wanted to say something about what Justin was saying about the Twitter spectacle today. I do think there's something to be said for everybody who is active on Twitter in the best ball space and probably maxing BBM. I would expect almost everybody to have an above average advance rate, because I have a lot of friends who very casually drafted some best ball teams. They went 0 for 5, 0 for 7, 0 for 10. Like, they're not advancing any teams. Like, it's pretty common, I think, that people draft 1 to 10 teams and just brick all of them. And so if those people are in our lobbies, I mean, when I click through some of the teams, because I mostly auto draft my teams, but then when I click through and review after, there's so many horrible teams in the lobby that's why I just auto draft, because I'm trying to just max every contest with good rankings and the correct format, because you can just set it to be like 2, 5, 8, 3, send in a bunch of teams. And I would just expect to have an above average advance rate unless I really whiff and hit a lot of injuries. So I think it's something to consider. Like, yeah, don't feel too bad if you're not, but also I don't think it's as much selection bias as it seems. I do think every one of us who are so active in the space, I think we're likely to have an above average advance rate going against a lot of people playing 1 or 2 drafts because their account got a free ticket and they don't even know what they're doing.
So this tweet from Laquan here is kind of making fun of more managed league perspective, where people, people can relate to in best ball, but it's saying 100 leagues, 100 playoffs in all of the leagues, and I got 99 bye weeks in those. So to Justin's point, like, this is poking fun of everyone sharing their advance rate. And yeah, like, are you going to hear from someone who's advancing 15%? Maybe they'll post for accountability, but the large portion will not post that, right? And again, advance rate's a lot of nuance. For example, shout out to Patrick, who and you should follow Patrick at Diablo2. He's the one who made the BBM4 leaderboard tool. He posted the exposure rate of a lot of players. And so, like, Justin pulled the quarterbacks on each percentage of the teams, and I pulled the chalk, right? So, like, if you advanced a portfolio of, let's pretend you advanced 150 teams and your teams are just loaded with these guys, right? These are the highest owned players at each position. Yes, 1 or 2 of these guys, maybe 3 or 4 on a team, you can win the contest. But if you only have teams with like the chalk players, it is harder to win the contest. They are not going to be the Jamar Chase hammer or the Austin Eckler hammer or whatever low-owned hammer week 17. So, advance rate doesn't tell everything. We have Justin M, who has the perspective of advance 100 or advance as many teams as you can, let the playoff craziness sort out. And then you have someone like me who's kind of on the opposite end, where it's like, I'm trying to uniquely build unique teams that I think the field's not building or whatever that can win the contest. And Neil kind of sounds like he's somewhere.
I'm definitely more I'm more on the JMac side of things. And I'm different in that I'm hand building all my teams. Like I am drafting. I'm not auto drafting anything. I'm trying to build teams that are going to be correlated both for the regular season and the playoffs. So I'm different than JMac in that sense, but I'm the same in the sense that I am trying to get as many teams advancing as possible. And I'm not really trying to correlate week 17 as much as you are, Liam. So I'm sort of a mix between the two of you. Like I'm definitely very focused on advance rate, which is why I say I'm disappointed with how my season went, because I'm focused on advancing and I still got sub 20%. And I actually almost made that point earlier on Twitter that JMac made. And then I was like, all right, that's kind of insulting to people with lower advance rates. That, like, I do kind of think like what we should be shooting for, if you are like pretty active, you know what you're doing, 20% is probably, because there's enough people out there who are drafting 6 quarterbacks or just like have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
That to me,
That's
it's like
there's a team advancing with 6 QBs.
Some people definitely just ran bad. And I'm not trying to insult people who drafted well and ran bad. I just think there's a lot of teams, like you said, that just have the incorrect number of players, and it's pretty much impossible to win with 1 tight end or 5 QBs or whatever people are doing without realizing it.
Right. But and so when you are drafting, I think this is kind of a process standpoint, you should think about, what edge do you think you have? If you don't think you have an edge and you're just doing this for fun, awesome, no worries, go do it. But if you're like, an edge seeker and you're trying to actually grind and improve, you think about, what is your edge? For Neil, it's structure. It is building sound lineups, and it's not taking player stance. And so in those situations, Neil's advance rate year over year is probably going to be pretty consistent between like 18 and 24%. Like it's going to be hard for him to actually get above or below that just from a pure, he's got too much of a balanced player portfolio. Justin is saying the construction, it's not as important, stacking, whatever you want to say, but his player takes and his from a quality of life is more important to not worry about the time to actually draft. Like that's most important to him. And so he might have those larger swings. We're on a great year where he hit on the right players as he did this year. What were you at? Like 30, 32, 35? I don't know. I know you were.
Yeah, I got 48 out of 150 through.
So 32%, 32%, I think that is, which is awesome, fantastic. And that's what he has the opportunity because he's going player takes. Because at the end of the day, player takes are the most important from a result standpoint. They're probably the hardest to get right from a process. But if you could say like, hey, what do I want to get one thing right? It's getting the right players. And so that's where like, yeah, if you had the Anthony Richardson one is a good one. Like if you went, however, really high on Anthony Richardson, that seems like a really good process. And like in another year where he doesn't get hurt, he's a top 3, top 5 quarterback, and your advance rate is also 30+%. But instead, yours is probably single digit as you were, so.
Yeah, that's a great point. Speaking and like, I'm kind of like Justin M too, where I'm taking big player stands. You're doing it through rankings, and you have position limits. But I'm building more wonky rosters in general. Like I'll build a 5 wide receiver team. I'll build, just things I think people are not doing. I'll build an 8 running back team. But I can have bad years to Justin's point, where if I have either bad player takes or if I drafted a lot of Anthony Richardson, which I did, and I was helped out by other quarterback injuries, right? Like I'm just opening myself up to more risk. And to me, in something like BBM4, realizing how top heavy it is, like I like to lean into risk. Like my idea is it's such a high variance thing. I'm trying to win $3 million. Like I'm not trying to earn an ROI of 10% in this contest.
I definitely had some fun with the roster construction stuff this season because I thought it'd be a good idea or just something fun to do something that people that watch us or you guys specifically like would not typically do with smart roster allocation, and that being like what Liam was saying. Like I don't think I have any 5 wide receiver teams, but I do have a lot of 6 wide receiver teams, and that can either be 3-6-6-3 or 2-8-6-2, what have you. But I know for a fact that like people in my Discord, people that you guys talk to would probably like rather be caught dead than have a team with less than 7 wide receivers. So I want to find a way to use that type of roster construction and do things that are outside of the norm, but from a standpoint of like, well, I think I can do this in a way that maybe makes sense or makes more sense than the way somebody that doesn't pay attention to the best ball content would normally do that. So I will say I did do some wonky stuff in my portfolio. But I think
and that's
my
risky,
downfall,
right? Like,
yeah,
but like building wonky is inherently risky, right?
Right.
Like you're
I had fun
not
doing it. Like, I
you're
wasn't
not
like
buffering yourself at all for injuries at the position, right?
yeah,
Like, which is maybe not something I took into account as much, because I did a lot of what you said, Nez. 6 wide receiver, 5 start quality, and then just go quantity at running back.
Yeah, and if done the right way, you could have probably smashed. But I mean, I didn't get there with the ones that I did. But I do have a handful of like 3-6-6-3s that I do really like. But I think for me, my downfall was just like, I don't know, you look at my exposures and it's not fantastic. The top half of my exposures are not great. I mean, I had a lot of Jalen Warren. I thought that was going to be awesome, and it turned out he was just like okay. A lot of Kyle Pitts. I mean, it's just. I know the risk going into it, and I think
Nez, are you back on Kyle Pitts next year?
Jesus Christ, man! I don't know. How can I feel like nothing's changed. Like, well, how can I not be back in?
When Justin Fields is the quarterback, I think I'll be in.
He's a Steeler, brother.
We've talked a little bit here. Let's just go around the table, and I would just like everyone to say one clear lesson they felt they learned from best ball. And it can be a lesson you've learned in the past. And it's like maybe you felt you knew this thing, which there are plenty of things like that. And then, you go through it and you're like, well, fuck, I have to learn that lesson again. Or I thought I knew it, but I wasn't really doing it. So if anyone feels ready to kick off with their lesson, we'll just spend time debriefing everyone.
I have my lesson ready to go.
Go ahead.
My lesson is that I need to draft more running backs. I think my instinct when I saw the structure of these tournaments, the 3 wide receiver, 2 running back setup, I draft way more wide receivers. And I think that was also when I came in, started watching best ball content. That was the general philosophy is you need to be drafting a ton of wide receivers. People drafting 9, 10, 11 sometimes on underdog wide receivers, which is too many. I think that I've come around to running backs get hurt so often that I look at my teams that are advancing and it's like, I'm lucky if I have 2 healthy running backs when I draft 5. So I'm thinking running backs generally get hurt more frequently than wide receivers. I probably need to even out those positions more than I have. Cause I think historically I draft probably more 4 running back teams than 6 running backs teams. Maybe not. I think 5 is probably my average, but I definitely go light on the running backs, heavy on the wide receivers. And this year, just looking through my portfolio, I'm like, man, I think this has been my struggle every year is I look at my teams that advance and I'm like, wish I had another healthy running back that could possibly score points for me on this roster. And I run into that every single year. So I think my biggest takeaway this year is just I need to change my structures a little bit more to be a little bit to draft more running backs as opposed to just going all in on the receivers.
And do you feel you were drafting more of the like 3 at the top, 4 at the top, so you felt you felt okay stopping at 4, or were you doing like 2 at the top, 2 in the middle, did you was like J.K. Dobbins, like did you run bad on injuries, or was it quality of player, or like what was it?
Yeah, I mean, J.K. Dobbins, certainly I mean, I had 9%, I think. I didn't have like an overload of J.K. Dobbins. Honestly, I think that I probably also just didn't draft enough talent. Like I tried to allocate, obviously the right amount of talent at each position. But I think even there, I probably didn't spend enough on running backs. Like I wasn't confident enough in like Travis
if you
Etienne.
drafted Eckler, like you drafted talent, it just didn't work. Like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think I had 4 shares of Christian McCaffrey across all of BBM. So that hurt me a bit too. But just, yeah, I think that I maybe just got the talent wrong largely. Like I drafted a ton of, I mean, if I could have turned every one of my Evan Hull lineups into a Zach Moss lineup instead,
yeah,
I would have a much higher advance rate. So a lot of it for me is also just that I drafted wrong. But I think that if I just gave myself more outs to getting lucky on those running backs, I would have probably had a better year.
I really like that point because your takeaway was my exact takeaway from BBM2, where in BBM2, this is what I did. I drafted the concept at the time was like get wide receivers, right? And Justin had just won BBM1. And people that weren't in the content space back then, there was not a lot of best ball content, right? Herzig just shipped, and he shipped with a hyper fragile team. So what did the field do? They were just like, all right, great, signs up. Sounds good. We're building Hyperfragile. And I want to say Hyperfragile was like 40% of BBM2. And
I think I accounted for like all of that.
Yeah, it's just people were just like, Justin was like, this is how I won. And people were like, that is awesome. Great. I'll do the same thing. And it's like
hilariously bad too, man. Like they were like hyper fragile with like 2 of the 4 being like backup running backs who are like lottery tickets.
Yeah, no, like I looked at my teams and I like so many good wideouts. I'm like, man, I can't field like any running backs. So
because like that was Neil's takeaway. You said that was your BBM2 takeaway. That was like my BBM3 takeaway. So yeah, like now when I look at my teams, like my advance rates didn't like improve that much from last year, but the teams that did advance, I like a lot more. And it's because my running backs are like I've got a stable.
That's right. Let me jump on this hyperfragile because it's been an interesting trend, and it's not just that like the actual drafts have changed that hyperfragile doesn't work, and this did stop about 2 years ago. When I won with hyperfragile, I was able to draft running backs in the I went kind of like I think 1st, 3rd, 4th, 7th or something, and it worked because the wide receivers that I could get in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th round were great wide receivers. Because of the way that we have pushed wide receivers so far up drafts, those 11th round wide receivers, the Garrett Wilson, who 2 years ago when he was a rookie was going 11th round, those are going in the 6th round, 7th round. So if you go with a hyper fragile running back situation now, you're either one of 2 things. You're either drafting running backs very early to get that high quality, which you need, but in that situation, you're screwed at wide receiver and you can't make up for the quantity. You can't make for the quality with quantity because you're so far behind the 8 ball, or you're not going like 4 early. And so now you're mixing in, you're getting those good wide receivers. But now in the 11th round, you're going for the hopeful you hit Brian Robinson, more likely you hit Antonio Gibson or Charbonnet, who someone has upside, but it takes a lot longer to hit. And so when you have a Saquon, a JT, a I'm trying to think of the other guys who got injured, the running backs early on that were like good safe picks. Your lineup is completely tanked. And so hyper fragile is kind of dead in the water. And so I think it was 2 years ago, the year after I won, we started seeing it was like, hey, actually start to that hero RB, go 1 or 2 early. And now in the 10th, 11th round, you can get running backs that previously we were seeing earlier. And that trend just continues to, to evolve, progress.
It was really funny because every year I try to like mix it as far as like do a little bit of hyper fragile, do a little, but like I think it can work every year. And I did not do as much hyper fragile this year, and neither did the field last year. Like the field got burned in BBM2. They're like, we're done with that. We're doing different things. But this year I did do some hyper fragile, and the hyper fragile teams I did are all awesome because I like, if you landed on some of the guys Justin says it's not working, but this year it actually could work if you landed on Josh Jacobs, whatever, you get your 4th, and then your wideouts are Mike Evans, Nico Collins, Jordan Addison, like Tank Dell. There were late round wide receivers to my hyperfragile work this year, and it's just kind of like it's just who's available late in the rounds, and that's not a sticky year to year phenomenon. Yeah,
I think there's upside plays at every position in every round. Like they might not all work out, but I think like my strategy has been to just be super rigid on construction, which I might be the only person here that I'm going 2, 6, 7, 3, pretty much 95% of my drafts because I just don't see a whole lot of reason not to. I get like the case for, okay, if you have 5 wide receivers, but I just don't think you're going to nail every single spot in your roster anyway. So it's not like some people do like a 1 QB team and 5 wide receivers and get 10 running backs, but I don't really see what advantage it really provides you, to be honest. So I just am pretty happy going to 2, 6, 7, 3. And I think I have some teams where my last 6 picks of the draft were all 6 of my running backs because that's just the way that lobby went. And I was auto drafting, so I had no control over it. And those are my absolute best teams. I'm like Mostert, Jerome Ford, Gus Edwards, Kyron Williams. And all of a sudden I'm going in with just a loaded team of like, I'm labeling that team like stud running backs. And it was like 12 through 18 of the rounds I got them in. I think there's guys at every position that,
but that's not year to year, right? Like the quality of Kyron, Gus, like Moss, right? Like that's not just and next year those guys will be there.
Right. No, but it's like before the season starts, I'm saying like, I think you can kind of look at every round and say, this could be a year where late wide receiver smashes, late running back smashes. So like to your point, Liam, about making wonky drafts, one thing I actually like about auto drafting is that, and look, most people shouldn't auto draft. I just don't want to spend the time on it and I trust my rankings. But one thing I like about doing it is that you end up with really wonky builds that I couldn't do. Like every time I'm steering a draft, I can't let the 10th, 11th round go by and I still don't have a running back. I would always intervene. And it's led to some of my absolute best teams making some really weird builds that no one else would really do. So yeah, some years it's going to be horrible. And I have other teams where I didn't take a wide receiver until the very end. And those teams are horrible because there just weren't enough great wide receivers going that late. Or at least I didn't have them.
They were hard to identify.
I would say like would work. There was Puka, there was Tank, and there was Josh Downs, who was like, Michael Wilson.
They were all kind of like round 18 guys, like I wasn't going to go 16, 17, 18 in my rankings I'd have to be so high on them to end up with all of them.
And since most people don't auto draft, just real quick, like a strategy thing you can do every single year is on Underdog, simply instead of taking a 16th round ADP, a 17th round ADP, an 18th round ADP, is in some of your drafts, take 3 dudes with around 19 ADP, around 20 ADP, whatever. This year that printed because you had Moss, Kyron, Puka, Tank, etc.
That's my biggest learning lesson that I was planning on going into. So now that Liam said it, that was my biggest lesson is that I realized, wow, I was taking so many 16, 17th round guys that are now owned in every league. And I could have just dipped another round or 2 down, which is almost no drop off in value. And I would have these guys that are now completely unowned in the playoffs. Zach Moss was only drafted in like 7,000 leagues out of 56,000. It would make so much more sense to take Zach Moss than to take Gus Edwards. Even though he did work out, it just makes more sense to just take the other backup running back that no one else is picking. I didn't get enough Kyron because I had him ranked at like 200, which I thought, okay, I'll get some of him. But it really didn't work out that way. I just got constant Jerome Ford, constant Gainwell, all those guys over and over. can't complain about Jerome Ford, obviously, with Chubb going out right away,
Yeah.
but I have a ton of exposure to him, and I don't have nearly enough of Moss and Kyren, and I should have been adjusting that. And like Liam said, take a bunch of 18th, 19th round ADP guys, take them in 16, 17, 18, and you'll have some really unique construction. So,
and I would go as far to say, like, I don't know what round it is, but some years it's literally like after round 10, where like even this year, like I drafted 20% Tank Bigsby. I also knew he could have been a 0. Like I knew that flat out. I said that many times. I was like, this guy's either a pure 0, so he's risky, right? So some drafts I should probably be like, I'm not going to take the round where there's just a bunch of like, because the market just decides RB2s that they're just like, yep, these ones we draft and these ones we don't. And it's not really sensical always, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah. If you make your own rankings and then you look at ADP, you will be like floored by how far off ADP you are. And sometimes you're just wrong. But if you've done a lot of research and you're like, hey, I'm really confident this Kyren Williams guy is going to be the backup in LA, why are we drafting the 3rd string running back on these other teams ahead of the guy I'm pretty confident is the backup? You need to just fully lean into that and just draft the guy you're confident is the backup if he's not being picked.
It's a great point. Nezer Herzig or anyone?
Yeah, I was just gonna say for me, like the Tank Dell thing for me is like has been kind of tough because I thought I had good process in like not selecting Tank Dell. I mean, the offense was questionable. I mean, CJ Stroud. I had a lot of CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I thought they were like really like high floor rookie quarterbacks. I thought they were represented a different caliber of rookie quarterbacks that we hadn't seen. And I thought that like them being last round picks was like excellent for like my second quarterback. Worked when I took Stroud, didn't work when I took Young, of course. However, to the point with Tank Dell is like, I don't know that how I could have seen Tank Dell coming just because of like the size of the dude. He like listed at 5'7"
this year, right?
160. Like I was just going with that process. Like I was much more going to, okay, like there is data that says that the like size and weight of guys at different positions, like they hit different. So I was like, let me just do some good process. And I took more Xavier Hutchinson than I took because I looked at both of their film. I was like, I thought they both had the same range of outcomes of hitting. And boy, was I off on that. But like, I don't know how I could have seen someone like Tank Dell coming. Kyren, I think the writing was on the wall with the sitting out of the preseason, which I think like that information, there was information edge there. And I think we all had that. And I think people that, you know, followed people in the best ball space had that edge. That is something that I think will be like completely dissipated and something that I think we can see go away heavily next season, is like reading the tea leaves of the coaches that kind of, you know, basing on what they did the year before.
But we got Josh Jacobs the year before on that, right? So it's like it's not always linear. It's not always. Like,
I capitulated to that. I was told I was silly for liking Josh Jacobs by people, and so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll get off Josh Jacobs, and then he smashes. So you know, it goes both ways for sure. And for my lesson, I think I need to be. It's gonna sound really funny. I think I need to be more concentrated on good players. Every year I am spread out in like the first 5 rounds, and then I have strong takes on, you know, just guys that I think have a chance to do well. And like, and it's only been like 3 seasons of doing like high volume best ball, but so far I haven't had a good hit rate on these guys that I think have a chance at the back end. And for me, I think I need.
You want to float a name out that you feel a little burned from this year?
I'm an open book, brother. So this year for me,
no,
I
know what you're saying. I think it just helps to give examples to the.
No, absolutely, yeah. No, I'm glad you asked. I didn't want to just like go right into the portfolio, but for me, like I had a lot of Khalil Herbert. I liked Khalil Herbert. I thought that the Bears were being underrated. I thought Justin Fields could take a step forward from last year. I thought his cast was improved. It took a while to get things going, and you know that definitely kind of hindered some things. But also, Khalil Herbert was a total bust. You know, he probably shouldn't have been drafted.
There, yeah, it's like
injuries there. So what I did, and this was weird. and maybe this could work for another team, but I took a lot of every running back on the Bears because I had such confidence that offense was going to be efficient and I loved the NFC North. I thought that those were great divisional matchups for them. So I thought if I just nailed one of these guys, that like I could have some monster teams. I don't know who it's going to be because I liked Roschon. I thought Deontay Foreman was a good running back last year, and I thought Khalil Herbert showed some good film last year as well. So I was like, I think they have something going here. Let me take all of them and hope one of them hits. Answer was none.
Well, you said a lot of good stuff there, and you weren't alone there, because the market drafted 3 running backs from the Bears, which the market did not do that from, say, the Colts, where we thought JT was not going to play the whole season, maybe, right? They were just like, no, we draft JT, and we don't know who the backup is, so we don't draft him, right? And then I think a lesson you said there is a lesson we need to understand, is that size no longer matters that much in the NFL, right? We saw Tank. We saw Achane. Yeah, maybe they don't hold up as much. I'm not giving people that on Tank where he got like rolled up on, blocking on the goal line. But like, yeah, I mean, these guys can be explosive. There were some tea leaves for both of them. Tank Dell, apparently Stroud. I mean, not apparently, this happened. Stroud wanted him to be drafted, although we got burned from the CEH thing with Mahomes for that. Maybe wide receiver versus running back. Yeah, I mean, my girlfriend is not with this, but I've been saying it. I'm trying to get this. I'm in the lexicon of the American people.
I'm curious what Herzig thinks about that little rant that I just gave about my my exposure, sir.
So I'm always trying to think. At this point in time, it is very easy to take a lesson and be like, I should have seen this coming, or I made a mistake in this situation. But I think what's really difficult is tell me what's different from what your thought process was to the Dolphins.
I mean, like, I guess a better offense, you know.
But that's subjective.
But they were cheaper prices.
Mostert's age, right? Like, so, I think Mostert's age scared people off a little bit.
No. But I guess what I'm getting at is with the Bears, the way that Nez saw the Bears. He believed that the Bears had a chance to elevate, to be a very good, very efficient, great running team. And we're not drafting them in a top 10 round because we're not sure who it's going to be, but there's 3 of them and he just hopes one of them ends up being right. Okay, I could have said that exact same thing about the Dolphins. And the only difference from a process is one of us would have been right that the Dolphins would have elevated to an amazing team and one of them didn't. And so going forward, is there actually, like, what is the teachable lesson there? Because it's not that we should avoid 3-headed backfields, because in the case of the Dolphins, that actually worked out amazing. But like, are you actually getting better right now at projecting which team is going to be like better in offense? Probably not. Like, I don't know. What was the Dolphins win total compared to the Bears? Maybe it was about 2 games higher would be my guess. I really don't know.
I think it was quite a bit higher. Like,
you think?
Yeah, and I think there was like,
I would have guessed Dolphins were only like 8.5, and then I would have said like Bears were like 6.5.
Maybe that.
I have Bears futures. Right. I can tell you.
I did think people were talking about, like, we all knew Tyreek and Tua like had that elite ceiling, and I would say some people would say to Nez like, hello, rushing quarterback, running backs from rushing quarterbacks don't produce, which, like, yeah, maybe I agree with a little bit, but also we saw guys with like Jalen Hurts smash.
And you have the Ravens.
Yeah, you have the Ravens, best ball guys. And then like Tank was weird because I drafted Tank in May, but then when he became chalk, I was like, where we're talking about, oh, we don't want to draft the chalk guys. And he became chalk because he caught a preseason touchdown. So I'm like, okay, well, now I'm not going to draft the guy drafted at 100%. But it turns out he became chalk for a reason, right? Like, he showed something. So like it's a really weird lesson where it's like, I'm telling you, I faded him to be contrarian late, which was bad, right? But he's on a lot of my early teams because he wasn't being drafted then. So it's weird.
Nez, I actually think it was really good process to take all the Bears running backs.
You're the first person to ever say that.
No, I mean, I'm biased because I did the same thing. But I have like 30% of Mostert and Jeff Wilson. I thought they were going too late. And then I have like 15% of all the Bears running backs. I have 30% Chuba Hubbard and 30% Miles Sanders. You know, there's spots where I just thought one of these guys will probably smash, and I just want to spread them at random across all my teams. And I have teams now where I have Hubbard, Mostert, Jerome Ford, you just spread them out of the backfields that you feel like has potential. All the teams with Bears running backs are probably long dead, but I still think it was a good process. And it's pretty uncommon that all three would have roles. Like, I'd rather Jeff Wilson be dead so that my Mostert teams are good. And I'd rather Miles Sanders be dead so that Hubbard, and obviously not dead, you know what I mean? I'd rather Hubbard be really solid like he is right now. So I think it's just really unfortunate that the Bears are using three guys in an even split. I mean, that's a pretty uncommon outcome that I think that's a pretty very unlikely outcome from the start of the season, that by playoffs of best ball, all three of them would be splitting evenly, with Fields being the fourth. I think that's just a really bad outcome.
It is a pretty hilarious outcome.
Are we even sure that Deontay Foreman is a bust though? Like, he's advancing 18.7% right now. He was kind of the lead back in the most recent game. I think there's still upside in Deontay Foreman if you advance with him. So I wouldn't completely write off at least not one Bears running back.
Like,
Here's what I'm thinking about. What I've been thinking about a lot for basically the entire years. I can't tell if I really got Kyren wrong. Like, I think that I probably did get it wrong. Just looking at some of the, like, you look at the players who have the most of Kyren Williams, it's a lot of really sharp players there. To me, I was making that decision in the 18th round, and I drafted, I think, 4 total shares, maybe 3 of Kyren Williams. I was drafting a ton of Rico Dowdle and Josh Kelly. And the reason for me was these guys, I think, are all pretty comparable in terms of talent, which maybe I was completely just wrong there. But to me, it was like, I'd rather have the guys who are not getting drafted as often, and they're on better offenses where I think if they become the guy, they're going to have more upside. Turns out, I mean, I was obviously clearly wrong, because Kyren, they're just using him every down. Also, Kyren was coming into the year. Remember, the coaches were saying, "Oh, Cam Akers is our guy. He's gonna get so much usage this year." So I kind of believe the coaches there too. So I can't decide where I went wrong. It feels like I probably went wrong because I see how many other sharp players were just jamming in Kyren Williams. But to me, it was like, I'd rather have these guys who are not getting drafted on better offenses where it felt like better upside to me coming in. So I still can't figure out exactly where my process went wrong in not getting to as much of Kyren as others.
And you have to ask yourself with an individual player is like, are a bunch of people coming to the same conclusion, or did one content creator or one content site up a player and everyone just tailed that? Because that's true. That's two different things, right? Like, one is just like a holistic process landed people on a certain player. And another one is like, people are like, well, I trust this, right? Speaking for myself, why I drafted a lot of Kyren and why, like, I'm advancing 51 teams on DraftKings, right? It doesn't really, it's pretty binary. I drafted Kyren on as many as I could. It's simple. I did not see Kyren being this good, period, right? Like, not pretending that. It had to do with a little bit of Adam Schefter last year saying before the season even started, Kyren Williams is gonna get play on the Rams, and then he got hurt on kickoff. So like, that was back in my head, right? Like, watching the games, being plugged into the games, knowing the NFL. And then it was I thought he could just be like a Theo Riddick at worst, like catching balls from Stafford. He's going to catch a lot of touchdowns, like stuff like that. And then I knew Akers and McVay had fighting issues, plus Akers had the Achilles. So I thought I was really confident that he had a role, right? Like, I also drafted Zamir White. Why? Because I just thought he was like an RB2, right? Like, I wasn't as confident he had a role though. Like, Kyren, I was like, he's going to get me some points. He's going to get me some touchdowns. And then it just so happened that like some other things went the way. So I don't think anyone was out there being like, Kyren Williams is going to be RB11 in fantasy or RB5 in point per game, right? Like, that person is lying. But there were some things that led you to him being like a safe late round pick. And I think he was even drafted less than guys like you mentioned, Josh Kelly, whatever. So that was like, that's a plus for him. He's only on 3% of advancing teams in BBM right now, right? So like, he's a very rare player in an 18-round format.
That's a good point. I do think the way that I like to play, that I will lean into the ambiguity in backfields once again. I know it's probably not ideal for advance rates, leaning into something that I know could provide me with a zero, but the discount that you get on some of the ambiguity is something that I'll probably play again. I'm leaning more into the upside. Is what I tell myself is why I'm why the rates
that's a lesson I think the whole industry needs, because Leone did a lot of great work on the Best Ball Manifesto, and a point I heard again and again from people was, you cannot risk a zero on your team. which logically doesn't make sense to me when we're trying to win tournaments, right? Like, what does safety even mean in the 18th round? Is that Darius Slayton? Is that Devontae Parker? Like, there's nothing safe about the Patriots or Giants offenses, right? So unwillingness to lean into ambiguity is like outrageous for such a top heavy contest and just tournaments in general.
If that was the industry's take from that, I think it was misinterpreted.
And that could have happened for sure. Like,
because the manifesto with regards to Karane's team not having any zeros or minimal zeros. That was more of a reactive analysis by Leone to show, hey, it's really important to have like a full team and to be healthy come playoff time. There was definitely not intention for him to say, this is actually how it should change your drafting and you should focus on not having zeros come playoff time. If anything, it played more to the actual advance rate value of more teams is better because injuries are going to happen and you just want to be healthy come playoff time. But to your point, to Nez's, and this is what my learning was probably, is it is more important to aim for upside in the back of drafts than even if you think you may be getting 2 rounds of value on a player that doesn't have much upside. And I think that's where I probably made a lot of my mistakes. Tight end position, I think, is the biggest one with Dawson Knox, where I thought that Dawson Knox was a value where he was being drafted by like 2 rounds from a projection standpoint, from a role. I believe that Kincaid would have a role, but like they both have a role together. And I'm like, I have this piece of knowledge or piece of, what I believe is knowledge that when Kincaid is out there, Knox is not going to get benched. But the truth is, yes, I think that actually ended up being accurate. And I think, yes, there was actually like 2 rounds of value on Dawson Knox, but that doesn't mean that Dawson Knox should have been my pick in that spot because his upside, though, was completely mitigated by the role that he has in that offense, the type of player he is, Kincaid coming in. And in reality, I should be focusing on more of the Musgrave, the Ferguson, the McBride, which I have a bunch of those too, but I had like 24%, I think, of Dawson Knox. And so my takeaway for next year is be willing to say, hey, I'm not going to be willing to pass up a little rounds of value because this is projectable volume value for going for the upside. Because if you get zeros in the later half of drafts, they really don't matter that much. It's all about hitting those big upside plays.
Yeah, that's a lesson I definitely like early on when I didn't have, I barely drafted Mostert, right? I just chose Jeff Wilson and I drafted Achane at like 9%, right? So like nothing impressive. And it's like, if you didn't learn the lesson of swinging for upside after Mostert and Achane, which are both upside players, right? Like respectable offenses, fast as hell, period. Upside right there. That's all it requires, right? Then, you're not learning in this space, right? And so I made Justin took Knox. I learned that exact lesson last year. There was a little bit of hope that like he develops as a player, but I was like, yeah, Knox, he's going to get touchdowns in the Bills. And it's like, and he can never, ever be a league winner, right? Like he can be a low owned guy, but he just cannot, right? Like he's not going to do what, Laporta or whoever's doing at the position.
You didn't name another rookie tight end there, Liam.
I like Kincaid is nothing like Knox. Like,
we can't let this show get on to Dalton Kincaid. It'll never end.
No, but seriously, he's nothing like it, right? He's a first round rookie.
Right.
And so that right there, like changes the equation, right? Like we don't have a sample size on him. You just kind of have to believe the team. There was tea leaves on him. That's not the same thing.
Yeah, Herzig, I think I learned that lesson as well this year. I did end up 9% Knox, which is too much. It should have been 0. And I think
it shouldn't have been 0, right? Like, plus to Justin's point, he took him because he thought he would get touchdowns.
They weren't even stacked though. Justin's weren't even stacked. Those were just random 9% and hoping there was some touchdown.
In or out on a guy, and I was the same as Herzig. I was like, I have this guy. I have Knox projected quite a bit better than. But the problem is the mean projection is worthless in best ball. You should just be filtering by your ceiling projections, and that's where Knox comes up short. But the guy that I did that with, where I thought he's going too late, was Michael Thomas. And you just can't pick Michael Thomas in the year 2023. The guy is a bum.
Was he any different than Alvin Kamara, though? Like, to me, those were coming into the year. I thought they were very similar picks. Like, yeah, they're probably a little bit washed.
Olave was just clearly so much better that I'm just like, what am I really hoping for out of a guy running shallow slants underneath, getting balls from Derek Carr while Olave is getting the valuable targets and Kamara is probably ahead of him. So I don't know. I just looking like pretty quickly after I saw my portfolio of exposures, that was the one right away. I was like, ugh, I hate how much Michael Thomas I ended up with. So now that it's a total zero, it's been rough.
Neil, I think to yours, I think running back for wide receiver is a big difference there. And that's one thing that the ETR team has learned through chat this year is talent for running back just really doesn't matter that much in this league. And when I say talent, it's more so the combine type talent. And I know in the chat here, we were talking about what's Kyron's like 40 and such. Yeah, he was not a good athlete coming out of Notre Dame. You know, his combine, like all his stats, like not that great. But the truth is, like at the running back position, it just doesn't matter as much in this league. And especially now, if we start seeing more of these short, quick, fast guys that are getting 8 to 10 touches, and then you have the more, whether it is the Najee Jalen, where it's like a two-head, where it's more like the kind of Dolphin situation, or now we're seeing in Baltimore, like we have to be okay with like, I think, and it's just for running back position, because I think wide receivers, the exact opposite, is saying, hey, running back really is about role and opportunity, while wide receiver, I'm so much more willing to bet on talent.
So I 100% agree with you that it's all about opportunity for running backs. I guess maybe I got it wrong because I believed in the whole like, oh, they brought in Jamal Williams, he's going to have a role. They've got Taysom Hill still there. They've got Kendra Miller, the rookie, coming in. So like I believe there was a reporter before the year, I can't remember which one, but somebody asked him about Kendra Miller, like, does he have a chance? And he basically suggested, well, if Kendra Miller starts off well, he could just be the guy, just take the role.
He got hurt.
That was Underhill. And so Underhill was given some reports that Kendra Miller maybe didn't have his, full head on his shoulder from like 100% there, but if he can get that right, he has the opportunity to take it away. But he also
said Michael Thomas was back, right? Like he said Michael Thomas is back, and I drafted a lot until it was like I was with Justin. Or Justin M. I drafted a lot of Michael Thomas until August, and I was like, things are not like he's no longer clickable, right? Because I thought it was conceivable he could have been even with Olave. It didn't have to be Olave alpha, and Michael Thomas did get hurt again. Like, who knows how it actually runs out.
That makes him a smash where he was going, though. If you thought it was conceivable he could be on Chris Olave's level, that makes him a smash.
Or Olave overpriced, right? Like that's
and I think both were, I mean, and both things could be.
I thought both things were a little true too. I mean, I think Olave actually is one of the better picks at that round, but it just has to do with the bust of the other picks, not the quality of Olave.
I'm not going to speak 100% for everyone else here, but at least for myself, like I don't think this is really a we know ball type pod here in this stream. But I would guess the people who do know ball would be laughing at us right now because the ascension of Olave as a young talent and what we've seen and like what Harmon said out of his first year and such, like I think
people are also drafting the Falcons guys, and they're drafting DJ Moore the year before. So there's faults to the talent trumps everything. I
will say too with the running back stuff, like talent, like opportunity and volume is going to be one of the more the most important thing. But you can't just put somebody in Kyron Williams' role and get like those results. And I think that's just like what's tough is like we don't have a lot of ways to know like how efficient a running back will be in that, because now we see Austin Eckler tailing off, and now there's people wondering if he was ever actually good at football. Like can we please like just take like one small step back on that? And so I do think that like there is running back talent. We just aren't good at evaluating it, and also it's meaningless because they also have to combine those intangibles with the 90% workload that Kyron's getting. I mean, Kyron, Rashad White, those guys are doing what they're doing way more because they have that role than their skill, but you also have to earn that role. So it's a balance there, and I don't know how to account for that like not knowing.
Well, and another thing is like we are really bad at knowing when a player is playing through an injury, right? And so like we may be watching a player. Now Eckler, I'm not going to forgive because he's old, right? But if Eckler was 26 and was doing this and we were watching it, a lot of people would just be like, well, he's done. And maybe he just like rolled his ankle and he's actually like pushing through it. So like we're really bad at that context for year over year. Thank you so much, Matador Mike. He says, for some reason I could not draft an underdog. Okay. So I did 30 on DK, advanced 6. A lot of Foreman, Singletary, Montgomery, and A.J. Dillon. Good luck to you, Mike. I think this is a nice collection of running backs. Where like Singletary, we got to give Singletary some love because there are a lot of people shouting Singletary has no upside at all, and like that's not true. He obviously does.
But we all, I mean, I liked Pierce.
Should I go to my lesson?
Yes.
My lesson was a lot of what you guys said. Definitely the upside one was one I thought early. A specific lesson to me, though, I would say is actually kind of the opposite of Neil, where I want to make teams that can profit off of the chaos of an NFL season, right? Where we just know chaos is coming. We don't know how, we don't know what positions. We've seen it this year. All quarterbacks can get ruled out. And so in BBM2, I had the Neil takeaway. I looked at my teams and I was drafting like 2-5, 9-2 or whatever, something like that. And all my wide receivers were awesome and all my running backs sucked and I had no running back points. And I was like, well, this is bad. So I need more running backs and less wideouts when I'm doing quality. And I did that a lot this year. I did a lot of either 5 or on Underdog, mostly 6 wide receiver, and on DK, 7. And where that falls short is a lot of those 6th and 7th wide receivers are guys like Jahan Dotson and Quentin Johnston. And so either I'm not buffering myself enough for injury. So this is like a ghost of Christmas future for you, Neil, where you're going to like have my takeaway and be like, I'm going to alternate like this. And I'm warning you, right? Whereas like not, and it also doesn't take account into purely how the market has changed to Justin Herzig's point where wide receivers are pushed up. And so when guys like Tank or whatever exist, yeah, you're going to land on those guys on like 9 wide receiver teams. But if you did it like me, where you like draft 6, you stop, you go quarterbacks, running backs, just a bunch of running backs, whatever, like some of my teams I'm looking at and I'm like, I was too thin at wide receiver. And so I advanced some nice teams like that, but it's also, I don't know. So it's like, I really don't know the optimal amount of wide receivers or how to play it, or it's probably just not to be so rigid where still I can do that. I can do a 7 wide receiver, but occasionally I need to get like guys like Nico and whatever. Like I end with a 20th round flyer, which is hopefully Tank or whatever.
I do have some teams. Now that I think about it, I do have a few teams that did advance that I look at the wide receivers and I'm like, well, this team doesn't really have a shot because of the wide receiver. Typically it's because I have like 3 wide receivers who are all hurt. So they become really thin. I also think that it is Herzig made a good point about how the drafts shifted this year to like there were, as you were talking about, like 3 wide receivers that you wanted with ADP after round like 15. Like I don't even know. Like I can think of Tank Dell, Puka Nacua. Really, do you want like Michael Wilson was fine, but not great. There aren't that many wide receivers who you were drafting. So maybe it is just a function of this season. Like the players that you wanted late were generally running backs, maybe some tight ends, quarterback. Some of the late round quarterbacks were great. So maybe it is just a function of this year because all of the good wide receivers were drafted so early. I was still trying to draft that, 9th receiver in late rounds. And it was like Donovan Peoples-Jones over and over and just like shit, Robert Woods and some of them and just shitty players who really had, didn't do anything all year. And I just wish I had taken running backs instead, but that could just be a function of the way drafts went this year. It is like we talk about all the time. This is really just one slate. You can't take too much away from individual slates.
Yeah,
it's brutal.
I think another lesson, since Liam's gone, no host, we can say whatever we want.
That's right.
Another lesson that I think is worth considering is like in trying to evaluate running backs, because I think that's one of the more important parts of the draft is to understand how to draft running backs. The Saints are a team that I don't have any exposure to any of their running backs. And when I'm doing the backfields, I'm usually looking at how many guys are in play and what is their combined ADP. How much are we as a group spending on this combined group of running backs? And that's what led me to have so much Mostert and Jeff Wilson and so much of the Bears running backs, because I thought there's 3 guys in play and all of them are being drafted after 100. So there's almost no draft capital going into this. Whereas the Saints were Kamara going really early, Kendre Miller being drafted, Jamal Williams definitely a risk to steal the goal line role like he did in Detroit, and Taysom Hill. So there's basically 4 running backs that could all be taking the goal line work. I'm actually stunned that Kamara is getting as much goal line work as he is. I would have profiled him as like the 3rd most likely player to take goal line carries for that team. So I think it's really run good for the people who took Kamara that he's delivering what he is. I expected him to play about 50% of snaps and not be the goal line back, which would be totally useless at his ADP. So I think that in some cases, you should just look at how many mouths are there to feed. And it might work out great where Kamara just somehow emerges and has some weeks where he's just a workhorse, even though they have other options. But I typically think you're better off trying to go for the two backfield guys like Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss. I know Deion Jackson was there, but both
there was four. There was four names floated there. I would not. I would not.
The fourth one.
Evan Hull.
Evan Hull, baby.
I got a lot of Evan Hull who went on IR. He could have been Chase Brown. He could have been Chase Brown. Okay,
that's fair. Yeah, but all those guys had ADPs of not even being drafted, really. So yeah, that's where I'd rather go with the backup than trying to guess on the Saints situation.
Let's say the Dolphins and the Bears, none of those were going before the 10th round. So yes, there are three of them, but you're getting value with them. Kamara, the suspension, but like without the suspension, people are going like 6th round or such. But yeah, also Jamal Williams, like we didn't expect it, but he looked really, really bad to start the year. When Kamara was out with the suspension and Jamal kind of had the backfield, I think that's when the Saints just realized like shit, like he just doesn't have it anymore. Because I think going into it, I was on the same thing. I had very little of any of them because I don't know, yeah. For the reasons that you guys all stated. But also, if we want to just pulled up the wide receiver we were talking about, like where there might have been some falling value. And
yeah, let's get that in. Yeah, and I just real quick to touch on what Justin M said there. I think it's really important for people to be honest with themselves. If you took player stands, where you ran good and where you ran bad, right? So if you drafted a lot of Kamara, I would not have the takeaway, I'm a genius, right? Because a couple of things happened there. One, he got healthier. He was not as healthy in the past. I think he looks better this year, right? Like that's just us not having info. Two, to Justin M's point, there was a lot of competition for touchdowns there. Kendra maybe, Jamal maybe, Taysom I all thought were goal line vultures. And there Kendra got hurt. Jamal sucked, right? So like there was some run good there that helped him. Talk us through what we're seeing here, Herzig. And maybe zoom in a little bit if you're able to. You're on mute, brother.
God, this guy doing everything.
Yeah, I was just trying to get to see if we could do a quick round.
Do you need more time?
Nah, we're good. Just don't worry about this. Let's just make it easier. All right, yeah. So this is just ADP, and then it's sorted by how often they are owned in the playoffs with BBM. And you can just see, like, okay, if you were trying to find a high advance rate player of value in the second half, you got Nico, Thielen, Myers, and like a lot more, though, are early ADP. And this isn't, they're early ADP, therefore they should always, because they're better players. Well, no, because this is advance rate. And we're seeing in the drafts, in those earlier rounds, it was better to draft wide receiver. Those have the higher advance rates. If you're later on, yes, you got some big hits if you hit on these right guys, but there just weren't that many. And so if we were to like go the other way, you can start seeing, okay, a lot more of these later guys are in the 7%, 6%, lower. And so this is ownership. It's not advance rate. Multiply 2 if you want advance rate.
I was going to correct you on that. I got yelled at for that whenever I was looking at old data in the past for other best ball. But
yeah, so
you cover yourself.
I have them both here, but specifically was using the ownership because for a player like Tank Dell down here, he was only drafted in 35,000 leagues. So we want to make sure. I think it's a little more important to show that for the ownership in the playoffs. But high level, though, it just shows, and I'll probably get a better read on this on Twitter, but it show like pockets of the draft, which rounds should you be focused on different positions, wide receivers, those early rounds before it looks like kind of round 6, 7 is where we really wanted to go for wide receiver. If we take a look at, say, running back, I got a feeling.
And this is assuming, everyone out there, that the market holds, right? Because if for whatever reason, the market because what the market used to let us do, it used to let you take rookie wide receivers in like round 17, 18, 19, which you could again this year, Tank Dell, Puka, but those cheaper rookies. And now the wide receivers are pushed up.
To your point, this is reactive. This is data that this is not prescriptive. This is not to say that because this worked this year, it'll work next year, but it's good to kind of test your processes of, hey, why were you drafting X position and X spot? And then what maybe should you have done or what worked and what didn't? Let me clean that up from
And again, guys, I linked that link from Diablo. He posted the advance rate of all the players, so you can work out by multiplying the amount of teams, what their ownership is in the contest, and how many playoff teams are left. There's roughly like 110,000 individual playoff teams, right?
Yeah,
111,000.
it's 112,886.
There we go.
Yeah, so here you can see, here's the highest advance rates for the running back. A lot of them really were in that, what we thought were the dead zone, where you've got like 80, 81, 76, 65, 85, 88. Not too many in the early. I mean, one first rounder, one second rounder, 1 3-4 turn. And then as you get lower, we start,
And also, you know, this is obvious to some people, but the advance rate of a player is not isolating how impactful a player it is, right? Some players are being pulled up to week 17 correlation or how often they were stacked with a certain player, what have you there, right? Where Justin Herzig brought up, he was shocked that Pollard was a plus advance rate player. And my guess was it's due to correlation with Amon-Ra and Laporta. And also, all you had to do to be a plus advance rate player at that range is probably to outscore Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, whatever, because you get paired with AJ Brown, Diggs, whatever, and it works your way.
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at that yet? The week 17 correlation stuff, like I know last year people were looking at that. I don't know if that was an ETR thing, Justin, but somebody looked at
the data bowl thing.
Oh, it's a data bowl.
I think it takes a lot of like work to dive in. So
and
it
was not that many people who had done it last year.
I was gonna say,
I'm not sure if that happened.
I can't imagine that's impacting advance rates. I think you are too far into your silo, Liam.
We can look that up. You can look up the correlation
of
you can look that up on the tool, and you can look up the combos of Pollard and Amon-Ra versus the guy right next to Amon-Ra, and you can see actually a tangible difference. So like it's not debatable. You can look into it.
But I think it's small. It's like a percent or two, right? And couldn't you also?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Does that matter on the mic? Like, are we like we're trying to stack percentages here and there, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I just think the average player is not clicking Amon-Ra because he plays Pollard in week 17.
But that's maybe the people who are going to win the contest consume content, and so you're just competing with those people.
Fair enough.
You know,
like let's do a quick little. I have another tab if we want to.
Yeah. Real quick, let's just, because we've gone too long and this was about the best ball season, we can get to that in a second here, Justin. Right, I just want to look at No Half Step. First off, let's give No Half Step in his flowers. Amazing achievement, $500,000 prize to him. Mikey Juice, who is in this chat occasionally, I don't know if he is, got second place. He had a real shot. He had Eagles and Cowboys guys, but that game disappointed a little bit. And then Freddie D pulling it up in third. Congrats to you out there if you have any team in the leaderboard. Those teams, the number one team in the contest, a lot of people said you can't do elite quarterback. How is Josh Allen the QB3 in ADP again after he's just the QB1 year after year? Josh Allen to dig start, that is not what I would have guessed won this contest. I'm sure anyone would have guessed Tyreek Hill or CMC was on this team. But why did this guy win? It's because the quality of his late round picks. Not only are they smashes out of the park, but also they're unique in this combination where he went Gus, Zach Moss, Kyron, and unstacked Purdy. I guess that works when you have so many good players. Tank Dell, Nico Collins is a big part here. So just absolute monstrous team here. Do you guys want to talk about any takeaways from this team? There might not be any, and that's okay.
I mean, hell of a team. It's not often you nail your last 5 picks like that, like just absolute slam dunks. Well, hats off, and I think it's even more impressive that it doesn't have Tyreek Hill.
I mean, yeah, Diggs on it. Who Diggs is like he started hot, but he's kind of been a disappointment as of late. And like the Nico Tank Dell things, like this. The quarterback's the least important part of the stack is a good reminder to people. You can replace the quarterback points, especially when you have Josh Allen. So you can still stack teams just without the quarterback, right? He took Purdy, doesn't need another one. Real quick, we'll just look at the top 3. A Lamar Prescott team takes it down. He had a big showing from Lamar, but not enough elsewhere. Didn't crush the late round picks as much here, but Trey McBride, a key piece, likely gave him a week there at the end. Just a little bit weaker. Didn't have Kyron Williams on it, of course, and Freddie D here. I mean, a Mahomes team, a Mahomes Pacheco stack, the only Chief you could tolerate other than Rice, pulls up 3 here. Just crazy stuff there. So congrats to you, regular
That's
season.
my least favorite of the top 3 teams.
Yeah, that one, I don't like that one as much either. Let's go to Justin, then we can get to some of my questions and tweets I had pulled up. You're on mute. I'm not hearing you, unless you want me to go.
Well, it says he's unmuted, but for whatever reason, I can't hear him.
It says he's unmuted, but we're not hearing him. We'll go back to Herzig while he figures that out. Let's just take. I'm assuming everyone's done with their lessons. We can go back into that if not, but just a question here. You know, every year we've seen some random player kind of spike in the playoffs, and they advance a bunch of teams. Last year that was Zay Jones and KJ Osborne. The year before that was MBS. I asked this question, got some great answers. Do you guys have any takes for some guys who had okay years, not like amazing years, so their advance rates somewhere around average or lower, that you think could have a spike week and define the fantasy playoffs?
It's Zay Jones again.
I mean, Zay Jones again is a common answer, and I think it makes sense. He's coming off an expected fantasy points of like 26 expected fantasy points or something absurd. Calvin Ridley also like 24 expected fantasy points. So just monster usage without Kirk.
Do these guys have to be late round guys?
It does not. I mean, I don't know, right? Like that's kind of the spirit of the question, right? Like saying like Justin Jefferson's 5% is like, yeah, okay. Like,
because
yeah, I guess.
How about old Cooper Kupp, man?
What do we got on Cooper Kupp's advance rate?
He was like the lowest advance rate of the first round, I believe. And
I think Jefferson was.
Jefferson. Okay.
Yeah.
He's got to be up there. And I mean, he's about to destroy the Commanders this week.
Well, I think that's a Kyron week, but Cooper Kupp is
everybody
4,000 teams, so that's like 4 to 5% only.
Kadarius Toney is on more teams than Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
and he was not cheap. Kadarius Toney was not cheap, and he still is on more teams than Cooper Kupp. I mean, if Kupp could, I mean, these people that ran bad could finally get some redemption there with Kupp. I mean, everybody's feast on the Commanders. It's not just the running backs, even though it is going to be a Kyron week. But
I like that. I think Odell is a logical answer. Odell's just looking flat out good and could totally have a spike after having a whatever year. Neil, any thoughts on who this could be?
I was trying to think of an Eagles player just because their playoff schedule looks so good. Like somebody on the Eagles is going to smash, but none of them are particularly late round or low advance rate. Maybe Dallas Goedert, if I was going to name someone from the Eagles. I'm still looking though for the right guy.
You keep looking. Goddard, Goddard is low owned, but nothing crazy. Honestly, he's pulled up by the Hurts stack, I think, actually. You know, I think we're looking for guys like on 6K or below. Herzig, are you back?
Here's one. Okay. Alexander Madison. If he is healthy.
Is he concussed or what's the deal with him?
I'm unsure if Alexander Madison is going to play. I think I don't remember exactly what the injury is, but just looking at the Vikings playoff schedule, just thinking of players who have not done anything all year, who at least are set up for success. Alexander Madison is going to get the Bengals, the Lions, and the Packers in the fantasy playoffs in a spot where, like, theoretically, I'm not a big believer in the talent, but based on the matchup, based on the volume he's gotten, I think he could, if he does return, could be a guy that you want in the playoffs.
Madison not as low owned as you would think, but I think he fits the bill. 8,500 teams, similar ownership on Hollywood, Chris Godwin, Mark Andrews, who got hurt. I think Madison definitely fits the bill. I kind of like, it's usually like a wide receiver who does this. Like, it is a running back, but it's usually a wide receiver who just randomly catches like a long touchdown, and they were drafted at a high rate. So like, I like the OBJ answer. Like it could be MVS again. Like MVS has a good game. It's just like, okay,
Liam, I have 15 shares of McBride.
Trey McBride.
Yeah, I've got 15 teams advancing with him.
McBride is on 7K teams, so like decently low. Kyron is the true low own hammer at 3,800 with a schedule of Commanders, Saints, and Giants. Like that's pretty nutted. I think
Cup is right there above him though. Having both of those guys would be pretty sweet.
Yes, agreed. Like Kyron is right next to Nick Chubb for advancing teams who got down. I don't know who else fits the bill. Anyone else want to float out a name here? You could give more than one.
T. Higgins.
T. Higgins is I think that's a great one. Like I'm not a believer that he's going to spike, but it could happen, especially with Jamar Chase not practicing today. Herzig, do we got you back? No, we do not. Sorry, brother.
Good talking with you.
All right. Well, we lost Herzig. Thank you so much for him coming on. I don't know. Is there anything else you guys want to say on this? Nez, did you give us a guy? You gave us Cup. Give us
Cup is my expensive answer.
Bijan is my expensive answer. 50, like Bijan and Garrett, like same as Garrett Wilson.
Someone said Aaron Rodgers. That's a hilarious answer.
Could you imagine?
That'd be so funny. Give us a cheapie. Give us a cheapie, Nez.
Ooh, a good cheapie.
Just close your eyes and just find out.
I'm afraid to say it. I don't want to get yelled at for this.
I said Alexander Madison. Come on, you can say anything.
Like I visibly booed him when that happened.
What about little Jonathan Mingo?
Oh God,
he's been targeted more recently.
Getting the targets.
He's getting the targets, man. Getting the targets. They could have to pass quite a bit against this Falcons team that like Arthur Smith, it took him a whole season, but he's finally getting as good players the football. They could get boat raced, and Mingo could find himself with double-digit targets.
I just don't see the touchdowns, man.
Mingo was wide open. He was wide open last week for a 50-yard touchdown. Bryce Young just botched the throw, but he's had the looks. He's got upside. His expected fantasy points are really good if he was playing with a better offense.
Yeah, it feels like the new staff is really just like, hey, let's just see what the hell we got in this guy.
Yeah,
and
Hubbard. The new staff is just like all in on Mingo and Hubbard. The Thielen advance rate is probably a waste. I mean, the new staff doesn't care to throw to Thielen at all.
Yeah, he's a rocket booster.
Well, I mean, Thielen, I think, is also just slowed down. Like, his the age is catching up. What if
we
Kyle
all thought
Pitts
that going into the year? I think they're like defenses are paying more attention to him, which he can't really handle. And the staff just doesn't care to get the ball to an old man when they've got like 2 wins.
True.
What if 6% own Kyle Pitts is the key to generational money after doing nothing? He's got Carolina, then Tampa, pretty good against Tampa, and then I think and Indy is in there as well, and Indy's like a great tight end matchup as well. So I don't know. There's a chance. I also like Jalen Hyatt as a random spike week guy. Has a decent schedule.
What about Darren Waller? What is his advance rate low enough that he could do anything?
Oh, his advance rate's got to be really low. And is he going to play this week? I think
he says he's going to.
Yeah, he's around 5%, I would say, in the contest. So that's super low. Jamar Chase is around 5%. Really, the answer is anyone but CMC and Tyreek, because any discussion of this year where people don't frame it from what happens when you just place into like what are the advance rates on these guys? On Tyreek Hill, there's 19,000 teams, like let's call it 20,000 out of 112. So Tyreek Hill is around like 18, 20%. So 40% of the first round is held down by CMC and Tyreek. So anyone else but them that is like healthy and can hit a ceiling is awesome to have, right? Like I'm not saying you're upset to have CMC, the best player in fantasy football, or Tyreek Hill, who may or may not be healthy. But yeah, I mean, when you get Jamar Chase, who's like not been that disappointment at 6% versus 20%, That can change. And it should be noted that your ownership in your ownership at the moment does and doesn't matter, right? Like a guy like CMC is never ever going. There's never only going to be one CMC team in the BBM4 finals. There could be one Jamar Chase team, right? But if Jamar Chase scores 50 this week, well, then every Jamar Chase team is going to advance. So his ownership would go from 6% to like 60%. So ownership really, really hyper concentrates based on how you do in
That's
in
why.
the regular.
That's why I'm hoping all my players do bad this weekend.
That's now you're thinking.
Just not checkers, man. One other, I just wanted to mention real quick because there's going to be some new players out there. Underdog has got everything covered. They're going to advance your stuff. You're going to see who your opponents are. If you like to do that, you can look through their rosters as soon as the groups form. They pay, what you get paid out and is what you get paid out. They pay you out as you advance. So you're going to be, your expected winnings might show more than the money you got because you already got paid for that. So just be aware of that and keep your expectations in check. Like someone like Justin advanced 50 or so of teams. He could lose all of them week 15. That is in the round of cards. He knows that. Every year we see people advance a lot of teams, lose a lot in the playoffs, and then complain. And it's like, did you realize what you were playing? Yes or no? DraftKings is a different beast. The way it works is they take all your teams away. They give you tickets. So you should have those right now. There were wild card teams in DraftKings. I ended up getting 9 wild card teams. The cutoff line was around 1975. So any team that scored more than 1975 and didn't advance was a wild card team. And they take all your tickets away. Then they give you your groups. The groups are starting to form now. You cannot see the players on the opposing person's teams if you like to do that until the game starts. So I don't even think it's like once Thursday Night Football starts. I think all the games need to start for their players. And then
It's like DFS, yeah.
Yeah. Exposures are back, though, so you can see the exposures for your advancing teams that have populated. Am I missing anything there, veterans of best ball?
No. It's just, the best ball playoffs are an absolute beast. And, it's not as easy as it really seems to advance. So I think, like Liam said, keeping your expectations in check is going to be good for the mental health. Just have fun with this. And if you advance some, like feel good about celebrating, get your victory laps in. Absolutely nothing wrong with celebrating a victory, even if it's just advancing to the semifinals, because this shit is hard. I'm on this panel. I'm grateful to be on this panel. I don't have a best ball. I've never made the BBM finals yet. So
it's
I
hard.
mean, like, I appreciate Neil speaking so nicely and highly of me, but I haven't even made the best ball finals yet. And I consider myself not bad.
If you max BBM, you would expect to have a team in the finals roughly every 10 years. If you are just drafting an expectation, right? So keep your expectations in check for really large contests. Ron, thanks for the super chat. AT Perry's advance rate. His advance rate's actually decent, but the amount of teams left is so minuscule. He's on like 0% of teams. So if you have some, good for you, man. Justin, I want to talk about this with him, but he's gone. He pulled the I thought this was a good combo because not only is this a good combo for this year, but it's a good combo for next year of like, what are people actually going to do about the quarterback injuries? My opinion, and I think the prevailing sharp opinion, is QB injuries are largely random, but the market is not always rational, right? Like this is an unusual year for how many quarterbacks got hurt. And if you drafted a lot of whatever quarterbacks that got hurt, you may be really upset, or you may be like, I need to draft 4 QBs next year, and I need to always pair Mike White with Tua, and I always need to do whatever, like I need to draft Josh Allen's backup or whatever. CJ Stroud may or may not play. He was concussed. I think if it's at all close, he will, but we don't know. Geno Smith, I think will play, but we don't know on him too. Mac Jones will not. The grayed out ones are the ones that are out. So there's a lot of dead quarterbacks out there. There's going to be a lot of chaos in these pods. Playoff pod luck is probably a bigger part, just like hoping you get with dead teams, at least for week 15. So what takeaways do you have for this? And do you think the market is going to do anything about this, either by pushing up elite quarterbacks next year, drafting more 3 QB in general, drafting backup quarterbacks? What do you think people are going to do?
I think we'll see a big push in 3 QB. I think people will be very reactive to the results of this season, and go 3 quarterback. It just depends on, the short term memory of the field next year, how sharp the field will be, what kind of content is being made. But the data overwhelmingly will show that 3 QB is like my opinion. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but the data will show, because it's descriptive, that 3 QB probably had a lot of success. And, it's up to the messengers, the people who, take that data, analyze it, package it, and, write about it, to come away with the takeaways of, hey, we also had an outlier in QB injuries. I think there was less than half of QBs this season have played every single game. Like, there's been that many QB injuries. I know even my first
or haven't been hurt at all, right? Like, because Josh Allen played everyone, but he hurt his shoulder early on.
Yeah, I think that was the tweet. Yeah, I mean, even my first takeaway was man, I need more three QB teams next season. And then I'm like, well, hold on a minute, player. Let's just let's not overreact too hard. I want to still have my best chance for first, but I think people are going to overreact.
These things in a vacuum, right? Because it's easy to say, I want a third quarterback because they score high and I just want the high floor ceiling combo. But it's hard because, not only to Nez's point, where people think they're doing research from the past season and they're really just looking into what worked last year, and that's not actually predictive, that's descriptive. But also, it's saying I want a third quarterback ignores the fact that you don't have an extra dart at running back, wide receiver, or tight end, period, right? So how much do you value the safety of a third quarterback versus potentially landing on Kyron Williams, Tank Dell, Trey McBride, whoever?
Right.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to stick with 2 QB. I hope more people do 3. I hope there's people out there firing on backup quarterbacks. I think that's the most ridiculous waste of a pick you could ever have. I mean, what is the ceiling on Mike White? Mike White could start 40 games for me on a Josh Allen team. He'll probably never get a usable score. So I just don't see any upside to it. I usually go elite QB. I'm a little worried that the descriptive data from this year is going to say that elite quarterback is even better than
it's going to,
and it's always looked. And I hope that doesn't make it harder for me to get Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, because I think that's the way to draft, is you take one stud and then you take a high upside rookie late. I have a ton of Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Sam Howell. I feel like you just take the guys who might run, who might ball out on kind of mediocre teams, hope that they're throwing a lot, pair them with one stud. That's kind of been my approach every year. So I'm hoping the data doesn't really push everybody to try to copy that, because it's been nice the way the ADPs have fallen. I mean, Liam and I have talked about this, how Allen was just going way too late the last 2 years, we've thought. So I'm worried next year he might end up being an early second round pick, and that might make it a little harder.
Depends on what they do at wide receiver. I mean, Diggs is and just the cast around him.
Should it with Josh Allen? Probably.
No, I hope they lose Diggs and everyone fades Allen.
Well, funny enough, I thought the market finally sharpened up on quarterback this year, where flat, just period, mathematically, quarterback points are worth more on Underdog than on DraftKings. They contribute a higher raw percentage to your points, right? Just logically, right? There's no PPR propping up the skill players, none of that, right? Now, DK, people hoard quarterbacks, so it's that's part of it, but that's a fact. So this year, it started actually as Josh Allen was a 1-2 turn in May. And so was Jalen Hurts, and so was Mahomes. And the CJ Strouds and the Bryce Youngs and whatever, they were all round 11, round 12, round whatever. And Richardson was round 9. And I was like, wow, okay, the market has pushed quarterback up. And then I came back in July, and people who made content, I think, get excited for skill players. And then you also have casual crowds who are where are my running backs, or whatever they're trying to do. So it's these weird things throughout the offseason moving ADP. What say you, Neil?
Yeah, 100%. I think that for sure the top quarterbacks are going to go in the second round this year. I think Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, these guys are going to be pushed up to the second round for sure. Also, I think partially because the second round this year did so poorly that people are just like, those quarterbacks are going to look so much safer because we've seen them year after year. These guys are putting up big scores. Whereas this year we saw the volatility of those second round players not hitting. So 100%, I think that quarterbacks, at least the elite quarterbacks, are going to be pushed up more than we have seen in the past, which I think is probably correct. I think they probably should be pushed up on underdog, at least like you're saying. Makes sense to grab them a little bit earlier. I think the market is going to react appropriately to the top end quarterbacks. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the back end, because we did see some hits with CJ Stroud, Sam Howell. Like, are people going to adjust to taking shots on late round quarterbacks this year, or are they just going to be drafting those guys earlier? I don't know. We'll see what happens on the back end, but I'm pretty confident at the top end, quarterbacks going to be pushed up a little bit. The elite quarterbacks.
And it's a really complicated thing, actually, because the only thing that scared me about going like all in on Josh Allen and crew this year was the presence of Anthony Richardson, who I was like, he could match them. And so that's why I took 20% of Richardson. The other thing is, I think it's unquestionably an anomaly how bad the market was at rounds 2 through 3 this year. That is not standard. And I think, like, when I think through who's going to be a first, second, and third round pick next year, I think it's going to be all young players. Guys like Tank Dell, Puka Nakua. These guys we're excited about and are young, aka guys I don't have a lot of questions about. Who was at the top of the market this year? There's some old guys. Eckler's still up there. Saquon's still up there. So the market really holds on to these old running backs and wide receivers. Tyreek, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs. These are all guys in their 30s. So the fantasy market's changing. The fantasy market never wants to give up on an old guy too early. But, I mean, I think it's almost always better to give up too early than a year too late, right?
I think it's really interesting if you look at the way the market will say that guys like Eckler, Kelsey, Saquon, they're safe, but Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, and Raheem Mostert, there's no way they can keep going. That's where, like, I ended up with huge bags of Keenan and Hopkins and very little of the first, second round old guys, because I just viewed them all very similar. I just like, here's a bunch of guys that have had really strong careers. They still looked great up until this offseason. I think it's almost inexplicable how the ADPs got so far apart on a bunch of guys that profiled similarly. I'd be curious. I know we're eventually have something else to move on to on the show here, but I'm curious if anyone has any takes on how the market decides which of the old players are now dust.
I think that just has to do with how they did the year before, right? Like,
but Keenan was fantastic last year, wasn't he?
No, because he got banged up 5 games, hamstring concerns. Like, there was legit injury concern with Keenan from people.
And people this year, I think
maybe someone on this video call
creeped in to the picture too with Keenan and kind of like suppressed him a little bit. But no, it is interesting, and I think that's what kind of leads me to kind of fading a lot of the age flood just in general. You know, like even if it's at a high price, like.
Although, should you? Because Kelsey, you felt good about it. Eckler, you felt good about it.
If Kelsey hadn't started dating Taylor Swift, he would have been fine.
See, I will say,
old, maybe you date billionaires more often. Like, that's a risk.
When I say I was leaning into the age FUD and fading the FUD, Kelsey was not one of those. I did not like Kelsey this year. That is like the only thing that I got right in my fades was.
I fade a lot of age, right? Like, I full faded Eckler and Kelsey, and it had to do with, like, if you're going to hold up over a course of a season and you're going to be as productive as you were with as many miles as you had, like, okay, I lose. Like, I'm okay losing on those terms. I'm not okay losing because Jamar Chase has a great game against the Chiefs when I literally saw him score 50 points 2 years ago and he's 24 or whatever.
So do you think the Eckler thesis was right, or do you think he ran good?
I think it's definitely a combo, right? Like, unquestionably ran good, but when you're older, you're probably not as agile. You probably do get tackled more, which leads to more injuries. You probably don't heal as much, right? Like,
would you have considered Eckler like a big play guy coming into the season?
I considered Eckler got fat because Mike Williams was out of the lineup last year and Keenan was out. And when Keenan was out, that really correlates with more Eckler targets. So I thought there was also nuance. People were just copy and pasting stats onto this year. And, like, look, don't get me wrong. It was not a comfortable fade, right? Like, I was not like, this is an awesome fade, where I was like that with like fading Zeke and Kamara and BBM2. And sometimes it's bad process and you just run good, right? Like I did the same thing with Derrick Henry the year he got hurt, faded him because of age and injury concerns. And it's like, yes, I ran good, but also he's had a lot of miles. So do you get hurt more the more you touch the rock? Like it's not so simple. But like my overall arching point is I think the market is changing where younger players are going to be the top players being taken, guys like Nico Collins, whatever. And it's not as comfortable fading those players for elite quarterback for me as it is fading Derrick Henry.
See, young players, it depends if like how you would like describe that. Because like if rookies are going to go even higher than they did this season, then I'm out. Then like that I think is
you're gonna have no Marvis Harrison Jr.
Come on, Liam. I'm gonna take fucking Marvin Harrison Jr. He's
gonna be a 3rd round or higher guy. He might be a 2nd round pick.
And he deserves to be, and I'll take him. But like, you know, if we're gonna see like Tank Dell types be no longer in the last round, and now like they're up into like the 14th because like, hey, they're like a little rookie and they're fast. Like,
what's that costing you though? What 14th round player are you slamming the table for? Some RB2 who you hope lands the starting job due to injury?
I mean that's totally
fair. Like I will blindly take a fast rookie with an ambiguous quarterback. I will blindly take the Tank Dell. I will chase that to the end of time.
And then for every Tank Dell, there's a Tank Bigsby. You know what I'm saying? Like a costly rookie.
You can't just say Tank.
Tanks, come on.
That sounds really nice, but those are not correlated.
Well, I think for every Tank Dell, there's a John Mechie, right?
Yeah,
there's
John
Mechie
had cancer. You know,
John. Who are we to evaluate the? Yeah, I mean, I think Tank Dell was a fine process pick, but I don't think he was like incredible. I think he was just a dart throw of an 18th rounder that's really smashing. But I mean, I think there's a lot
of line killed, but I didn't love the logic of it.
Well, my point is that like I will take a proven commodity, like, you know, that is a veteran that people are scared of because of their age, such as Austin Eckler this season. Like I'm not worried about that at all. And,
maybe we just try to let's just snake draft the 1st round right now, us 4, and then say the guys we would be more comfortable and less comfortable fading, right? So like we're just gonna crowdsource. It's okay, like if you've not thought about 1st round next year, we're just guessing here. So I can start us off, or going first is easy, so someone else can start us off if they'd rather. Someone start us off. Who's the first?
McCaffrey number 1.
Thank you, Neil. And let's go Nez, me, and Justin just to keep it.
We'll go Tyreek. Easy.
Tyreek easy. And now it's a little bit harder. I think it will be Jamar Chase because I think Higgins and Boyd could be gone.
Yeah, I think this is the order that I would have gone, and I would take CeeDee Lamb 4th.
Yeah, and I think that's safe and makes sense. Neil? I think there's a clear answer here. Not everyone agrees with it.
You do think there's a clear answer? I mean,
it's your guy.
Yeah, Jefferson.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think Kirk is going back, but obviously there's QB questions, right? Like if your quarterback's Mullins, who knows? But I don't think people are talking about discounted Jefferson. 105, 104 is not a discount, you know. Nez, what do you got? 106.
You know, I might be forgetting some folks, but I think this might be where we get our RB2 off the board, and I think this might be Bijan.
I agree there. And the only guy who has any age concerns right now that we stated, actually there's 2. Tyreek and CMC are the only age concern guys.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Tyreek loses a step, he's no longer Tyreek. And CMC is a running back with a lot of miles. So we know what can happen there. But, you know, I'm going to take those 2 dudes because they could punish you if not. The 107, I think, is when it gets a lot harder. After Bijan, you know, names coming to mind are like, depending on the quarterback situation, I could see Brees up here. I could see.
I'm probably taking Amon-Ra in the 1st round.
Yeah,
next year.
I think the safety of Amon-Ra makes sense. Like I saw, friend of the show, Sam Sherman had Diggs. I don't even think Diggs will be in the 1st round unless he has like a huge game. he's older, whatever. But yeah, okay. I'll go Amon-Ra. Thank you for that one, Justin.
A guy that I'm going to have a lot of, he probably won't be a first rounder, but I think Michael Pittman Jr. is just like really coming into his own.
He is not the 108. You think he's going to be the 108?
He's not. But I think you could. He could be a second rounder that you end up just loading up on.
Okay. He's going to go back to that BBM3 price for sure.
Oh, AJ Brown. Sorry, I would take over Bijan too. I think it goes for me. It goes AJ Brown, Bijan, Amon-Ra. Thank you guys. And then I don't know. Like from here, it's like names I would accept: Puka Nacua, Tank Dell, Nico Collins. Like honestly, if healthy, I would take the Texans guys.
I don't think you can take Puka Nacua in round one, given that his real life draft position was like, I mean, no one thought he was really that good of a prospect, and then he's really boomed. But I don't think he'll end up in the first round. I bet he's like a late second. You can't take the dude who needs 30 targets to score 40 points and Michael Pittman at the 109 either. You know, like you're not going to get 40 targets a game.
Puka Nacua is the same profile. He just gets force-fed targets. Like it's the same thing.
You're a little bit more down the field.
I mean, like we're getting out of the first round.
Achane, sure. I would take Achane at the 1-2 turn. I would. You know, like I'm swinging for upside. I'm not taking Austin Eckler there.
It's gonna be fun. That's for sure. Where do you think Diggs is gonna go, Liam? Like you're the obvious like Bills fan here. I think he's got very fragile value right now.
I think he'll go 1-2 turn depending on who the Bills draft. I think the Chiefs just double covered him that game, right? Like they dropped a safety over the top, and so teams are still showing him respect, right? Like he just dropped a bunch of screen passes. So I think Diggs is fine. I actually think his game will age gracefully. But there is risk with him, Devontae. Devontae Adams could be a Jet. He might be a Jet with Rodgers next year. So maybe he's up there, you know?
I hope that there's FUD on Stephon Diggs. I will just say that. I hope that people see that he's on the wrong side of 30 and think that his value is just like about to crater. And I think that's what we'll see. Like his he's got 2 games in the last, or 3 games in the last 4 games under like 6 fantasy points. And it's way more about what have you done for me recently when it comes to best ball players. I would love to get a little Stephon Diggs FUD, but he's an age guy.
I think Pollard maybe like it's hard to get these guys after that.
What about like Ayuk? Could Ayuk get to the first round?
If Debo and Kittle are still there and CMC,
yeah, if they're all still there, it's going to be tough.
But like, I think he's a second round guy, right?
Yeah, he'll be like the good wide receiver 2 pick. Where I was guilty of it too, and I still would take Waddle again. Where I did take Waddle, like Waddle and Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith has had better games, but those guys were clear wide receiver 2s. And I know there's a lot of people banging drums saying that hey, like these are not good best ball picks, but I would take Ayuk in that
Calvin
second
Ridley,
round.
who we definitely like. There was a risk there with him sitting out the season, right? Like the point is, I think the top of the draft board is getting younger because people floated out DJ Moore if Caleb Williams goes there.
Yep.
Marvin Harrison Jr. I will just at least match the field at whatever his price is. I really don't care where he goes. He could be a New England Patriot for all I care. Guys like Ayuk, yeah, like Ayuk's upside, I don't want to ever be out on. I don't know, maybe and Debo goes ahead of him in half the draft. So
one thing I feel like I learned this year is that I don't want to take guys that aren't volume monsters as my second round pick. Like I think every time I had to click on Higgins, Waddle, or Devonta Smith, I felt like, why am I taking a wide receiver 2 in round 2 when I could just be taking a guy who's the stud on his team? And in all 3 cases, I'm like, why did I do it? I didn't want to do it at the time. I did it anyway. And now I don't get why I did. So I think it's, and maybe it's just, maybe it's results bias, but I think it's hard whenever you have the thought of that you don't want to play someone and then you click on them anyway, it sticks with you more. So maybe it's results bias, but I personally am trying to avoid backups or second guys on their team. It's just harder to have spike weeks when you're getting 8 targets and Michael Pittman's getting 13 or 14. How are you supposed to beat that? You have to have
half point PPR versus PPR. But
what'd you say?
It's half point versus PPR. Like on DraftKings versus Underdog, I think it's a little bit different. But what I hope is the takeaway a lot of people have from this combo is, I mean, just how fragile rankings are at every part of the draft. So truly, do not be afraid to IKB at any point. And I don't care if it's the 1-2 turn or whatever, right? Like, you're getting uniqueness. So if you're like, no, I don't like Eckler, Saquon, Pollard, any of these guys, like, I'm just going to take Mark Andrews or someone that's like reasonable and could hit a ceiling, right? Like, we just said a bunch of guys who we think could be like Michael Pittman, whatever. Like, as long as that guy hits, which is the hard part, you know, like, you can justify it. All right, guys, we're coming up on 2 hours. I don't want to hold too much of your time. Let's end it by looking at our favorite teams. Did everyone DM me that?
I did not, but I can look at it and send you one.
Yeah, just look at it, and let's just look at some teams before we get out of here. We might as well also look at the players who just the top scorers on the season so far. Real quick, just running through the top 5 at each position in half-point PPR. Tyreek, Lamb, Keenan, A.J. Brown, and Jamar Chase is the 5th highest scoring wide receiver in fantasy, and he is a 6% advance rate guy when mathematical expectation is 16%. So the wide receiver 5 is 10% under advance rate in BBM4.
My brain does not compute that.
No, not at all. And it just has to go with.
I'm like, is this right? Like, is that real?
It has to do with Burrow correlation a little bit, but just how much.
No, I mean, it's more so the raw ranking of him. Like, I did not expect that to be a wide receiver 5. Wow.
No, right? He's like barely behind AJ Brown. Running back, it is CMC lapping the field. ETN RB2, Mostert RB3, insane. Rashad White, RB4, and somehow Joe Mixon is the RB5 in fantasy points in total, at least, not average. Obviously, Kyron is the RB2 in average. Kamara's up there, but I mean, Joe Mixon is the RB5 in fantasy. I had no idea, honestly. He's had some good games recently. But yeah, like Rashad White, I would say, is the big guy where like he was kind of a polarizing player. People were either in or out on him as like a just like raw volume on a not impressive team. Quarterback, Allen, QB1 again, Hurts, Dak Prescott, a resurgence of the Cowboys, Lamar Jackson, only QB4, and Brock Purdy, QB5 on the season. Pat Mahomes, QB7 after Sam Howell. Sam Howell, QB6. And then at tight end, Kelsey, Kittle, Hawkinson, Laporta, Taysom, Hill. The tight end 1 in fantasy, averaging less than, sorry, let's do half-point PPR here. Averaging less than 15 points per game. Kelsey is, Hawkinson's at 12. Jefferson's out again now. Any takeaways you guys have about any of the players before we look at your teams?
No, not really. I mean, it's hard for me to take any lessons into next year, really, by seeing this. But I'm just gonna go little victory app. I'm glad my Chiefs fade looks good. That's one thing that I'll hang my hat on.
I'm with you there. Yeah, I mean, it was not a comfortable fade, and like it was kind of hard to like logically make it work in my brain. Where I'm just like, I don't think the Chiefs are gonna be that great, and like Kelsey's 34, but it can happen. Like, and I think a lesson is passing quarterbacks like Mahomes versus Hurts and Allen, who get rushing touchdowns, are really dependent on how good their weapons are, right? Yep. And when you have a 34-year-old tight end as your number one weapon, if that dude gets hurt or slows down, you're cooked when you're throwing to Tony. All right, let's jump into some teams and get out of here. We got Neil here. Talk to us, Neil.
Yeah, I can't read it on the screen, so I'm going to pull up my phone. So it's Hurts and Tua. So I love that quarterback combo, particularly because,
by the way, not our top scoring.
This is actually both for me. No, it's not. It's not my top scoring, actually. No, I thought about sending you that one. I sent you this one instead. So what I love about it is I love the schedule for the Eagles in the playoffs, and I have a good amount of them. So happy with that. I think it's a great combo at quarterback. Obviously, Hurts and Tua both have mega upside. At running back, Breece Hall, I still think this is, as I said, I have a lot of teams that are very weak at running back. This team is pretty strong at running back. Breece Hall, Javonte Williams, Raheem Mostert, and Zach Moss, I feel like is a really strong core 4 running backs who can all put up points.
And Zach
Oh,
Moss, super low owned, so you
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
great about that.
Exactly. So there's a lot of things going for it on that front. A little bit weak at wide receiver. If Tyreek misses, this team is probably dead. But if Tyreek can come back and be Tyreek again, lock that in. Devontae Smith, has spike week potential. Deontay Johnson, I think, still has spike potential. Elijah Moore better with Joe Flacco recently, so not great, but there's that. Jacoby Myers has kind of fallen off a little bit recently, but has still shown a little bit here and there spike week potential. MVS sucks and doesn't care. Alec Pierce has shown a little bit of spike week potential recently. Devontae Parker, I don't know, whatever. He's another
I
wide
drafted
receiver.
so many guys like MVS and Pierce, and that was another lesson from me too, where it's in the cover 2 era, it's tough for these guys to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of you said your team's weak at wideout. I think that's system wide. A lot of teams are weak at wideout. So not a killer.
And then the tight ends, I got Dallas Goedert, who again has a great playoff set of games, and Shiga Okonkwo, who I think still has some spike week potential.
This is a fun team. I thought the whole Moss combo is super sharp. Not something I did enough. I just
I did it very little. Yeah, the two running backs from the same team, one of my better teams early on, kind of fell off, but had both Mostert and Achane. I feel like next year I might do a little bit more of the double running back from the same team thing.
Yeah, and this is something where, Justin, I agree with Justin, where people read Leone's thing and they had maybe the wrong takeaway where they couldn't risk zeros, but people would flat out not do this, because God forbid you have a zero. But we're not what if you capture a league winning running back? You'll easily take a zero on every team to have Zach Moss.
Exactly. Get one of those two right. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome team, Neil. Good luck. If it's not me or one of these other gentlemen, it can be you. Let's get to Nez's here. Oh God. Why is it doing this? Open.
There we go.
Open image and new tab. Okay.
There we go. Bang.
Talk to us, Nez.
All right. So this is a pretty interesting team. A lot of my teams don't look like this, but we've got the Justin Fields, Jordan Love combo. So Love having one healthy QB, let alone two, feels pretty damn good in this era. Little Saquon, Henry. If I can get Aaron Jones healthy, that'll be huge. But thankfully, we have Kyron.
I think he's gonna play next week, right?
I thought he was going to play last week, to be honest.
I did too,
and then got rugged on that. So the running backs were healthy there. And then this is a zero wide receiver team where DJ Moore was my wide receiver one. I have a lot of teams where DJ Moore is my wide receiver one. And then we get
Justin 105, Michael Pittman.
Yep. Then we get Pittman there. And then we just have guys that have been popping up at good times, kind of alternating starting lineup spots for me there with Dubs, Jacoby, Jaden Reed, Curtis Samuel. The Chase Claypool was obviously a Justin Fields stack pick, LOL. And then if I can get Darren Waller back along with Kyle Pitts, I'm going to be thrilled with that. A lot of my Kyle Pitts teams, and I felt like this wasn't necessarily, to use a colloquialism there, to put a condom on the team, to take two elite tight ends. I thought that actually had some upside potential, and I did it a lot with Kyle Pitts. I did a lot of Hawkinson Pitts, Kittle Pitts, and Waller Pitts here, just because I just felt like these guys had the ability to put up flex startable numbers and get me into an advanced rate spot. So this is by far my favorite BBM4 team that I have here. It's very healthy, and we have some sneaky ceiling on here, and it looks different than I think most advancing teams.
Yeah, the Jaden Reed pick was a popular answer for the guy who could define the fantasy playoffs.
Salivating over that Tampa Bay matchup.
If Tyreek Hill misses, does just Chase Claypool get any opportunities?
Oh, Neil, come on, man! Gonna need a change of pants.
Neil, save that clickbait for later, man. So there are a lot of Chase Claypool enthusiasts. Justin, did you DM me yours?
I did, yeah.
Okay. So we do.
So this team I picked, it's not really my favorite in terms of
First off, light mode, boo! You got to get dark mode on.
This is a true auto drafter. He doesn't spend time on the app because he's still got his.
Your number one lesson should be turn off light mode or you'll get bullied.
That's fair. I'll accept the bullying. This team I think is just wild.
A solo quarterback team is your favorite, really?
Well, it's my favorite in the sense of to talk about. It's my favorite team to look at and just think, wow, how did this happen? Because this is
not you don't think this is your best team to win the contest?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
This is my only share of Alvin Kamara, and I think it's my only share of Deebo Samuel. And they landed on the same team. And then it happens to pair with a bunch of my favorite RB2 picks, which was Singletary, Hubbard, and Ford. And then Clyde, I don't know how that happened either. I think I have one share of Clyde, and it just happens to be on this team, and Pacheco might be out. So there's all of a sudden this team is really interesting, and all 7 of these wide receivers, this is probably my favorite wide receiver team. I think all 7 of these guys could go for 20 plus, and I would not be surprised. So if this hodgepodge of running backs that I kind of like, I don't know, no one would really want that as their running back stable, but I kind of believe in them. And then I love having Trey McBride. He's on most of my teams that are advanced. So yeah, I mean, Higbee flashed the 2 tight end upside. I don't believe in him at all, but
you had that game.
I don't know. It's kind of a fun team, and like having the Russ solo QB will just make it really interesting to just be like all in on Russ. So I somehow ended up with like 4 playoff teams that have just Russ, and I only have 9% Russell Wilson. So I don't really know how that happened, but if Russ goes nuts, he'll be carrying a lot of my teams.
This is how you used to be able to build a lot of teams in Best Ball Mania, where it's very difficult to have a team with this quantity of quality wide receivers in this year's, right? So like it's just hard. Used to be able to build a lot of teams with like, the wide receivers dropping, but it was hard this year. And so yeah, I mean, if you had 2 quarterbacks that were playing, this would be like a world-class team. It is kind of nice to have a simple sweat though. It's just like, it's just dangerous. Let's ride. They're going for the playoffs. They're in there, So
Liam, partly why I had to submit this team is because this is such a testament to auto drafting, because there's no way if I was steering this team.
What do you mean you stacked here and you built a zero running back anchor? This is normal.
But if I was watching this draft play out, I would never have let it click on Deebo Samuel.
Well, that's your bias. You're saying your bias requires.
I was biased against Deebo, even though he must have fallen so far in this draft that it hit where I had him ranked as the top player. But because I didn't want Deebo this year, I would have intervened and taken another running back. But the auto draft gave me the best player on the board and got me my 1 share.
I'm not a proponent for auto drafting being smart for trying to win the contest. I think it can work. You were fortunate to fall on a stack here, Sutton to Russ.
You'd be surprised. Most of my teams end up with a stack because you've got 16 flex players and 2 quarterbacks. It can happen. It's almost harder than you'd think to not.
But the issue you brought up is more of a bias issue of yourself versus like a
right. It's a self-control thing. Can you really click on the top ranked player if you hate them? And can you really like pass on the guys you're supposed to fade? It's hard when you see a guy like I didn't like Quentin Johnston at all this year, but if I have 1 share of him and it's the draft that I was steering and he was falling 20 spots below ADP, and I thought, well, this is probably the time to get a share of him, even though I had him ranked even lower than that. And so, yeah, I don't know.
But those things can be binary, right? Because like some years that guy is a good pick, right? Like some years QJ turns out, right?
It could be, but I just try to trust my player take convictions over everything, because I'm spending my whole summer looking into like setting these rankings. So if I'm going to put all that time into it, I should really follow it. It's kind of my belief.
My team, I pulled up in the app actually. It is there was a couple. I always was going to choose a Kyron team. I have 9 Kyron teams. He's on like half of my BBM teams, but this is the 5 wide receiver team. So is a Dak Love Purdy combo. That combo right there is pretty fun.
Strong.
You got Love versus Tampa. Dak and Purdy are chalk, but like this is what I'm talking about, where like you can have some chalk and still win, but you just can't have like every single chalk guy and like Mike Evans and it's like then it's just too hard. It's 8 running backs, so that allowed it to carry a J.K. Dobbins who was just a 0 for the year, right? He scored a touchdown to begin the year, and they got hurt. It's got Charbonnet, Spears, Chuba Hubbard, Kyron Williams, and Ty Chandler, where like I thought he was going to be playing until Neil brought up Madison, and now I guess maybe Madison's back. I don't really know, but point is, it's got enough at running back. Only you really feel good about is like Kyron and like Chuba, but like the sum of the whole parts is decent enough. Sean Tucker, pretty 0-ish. Kendre, probably a 0. J.K. Dobbins for sure a 0. the 5 wide receivers are AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Deebo Samuel, Christian Watson, and Gabe Davis. So 3 studly guys. Watson, need him to come back, obviously. And Gabe Davis, just the spike week king. You know, like you can carry like volatile players like Watson and Gabe Davis when you have this quality. And then Kittle and Pitts. I'm with Pitts, I either did this or Lamar and Pitts in particular, I viewed as high ceiling guys, but they did not have the floor of their fellow elites. So I did do a lot of 3 tight end with Pitts, and with Lamar, I did some 3 QB, more so on DK, but I just didn't trust the floor of Lamar after he's shown us that he's kind of like a spike week guy. So this is an example of like how a 5 wide receiver can work. And why am I taking 8 running backs? It's not because I'm trying to hit 8 running backs. It's because when you take 8, it really raises the chances you land on 2 to 3 hits. Like that's really all you kind of like 4 guys that are like hitting your lineup is all you need when you're counting on Brown, Lamb, Deebo almost every week. So I think,
I don't think that's going to grow in popularity either next year. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to have more 8-6 type of combos or 8-5 combos personally, just because I'm not going to pretend like I have the crystal ball, and I just want to increase the bullets because it really can be a huge difference maker. Just wanted to say that.
But it doesn't work when your 5th wide receiver is Quentin Johnston, right? Like you can see I got at least 80 points plus from all the wide receivers. I got 150 points plus from 3 of them, right? Like that's a high bar to clear. So you need to be sure you are drafting talent. You can't just be like, oh, QJ's on the Chargers and he's a rookie. That's upside, which like I kind of just did, even though I didn't like QJ that much. So yeah, I think it's like a fun, unique team. I just think like any Kyron team is just so uniquely suited to win this contest, where he's low owned, he's 3%, and his schedule is nutted. So it was always going to be a Kyron team for me. Neil, Justin, Nez, Justin Herzig as well. Thank you so much for your time. Really can't understate how I appreciated doing this convo with you guys. We don't need to end if you have anything else to say, but thought we'd go around real quick and you could just tell the people where they could find your respective work online and really anything else you want to say about best ball or any takeaways you have before we get out of here.
You can find me at Stochastic on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. All my content is on Stochastic, on the Stochastic YouTube channel, written stuff on the Stochastic website. And go Eagles. That's all I have to say about best ball. I think my best teams are our Eagles team. So go Eagles.
And they're suited up well because they just lost twice, right? Like there's going to be, they want to hold on to that 1 seed. It's going to be really tough. They get the Cardinals week 17. You can't draw up a better matchup than that.
Yeah. And thank you for having me, Liam.
Of course.
J-Mac, go ahead.
All right. I'll save the best for last, Nez. Yeah, all my stuff is on reallygoodpicks.com. It's my own website. It's $29 a month for my NFL access, and you get the DFS projections and my rankings. I just posted my playoff best ball strategy today and my playoff best ball rankings. Although I should give a disclaimer, do not auto draft playoff best ball. You absolutely must manual draft that one.
Please auto draft playoff.
Correlation is very important. Yeah, you cannot mess with that. But I am a believer that you can auto draft or really should go off rankings pretty heavily for season-long best ball. So if that sounds like fun to you, then come to my site. Don't show up just to tell me you think it's lame that I auto draft. Everyone tells me how lame it is. I hear you, but I have a wife and I got stuff to do. So I can't jam in 450 drafts across all the contests manually. So thank you for having me, Liam. It's always fun. I enjoy coming on with you.
Of course, man. Appreciate you.
And yeah, Nez over here. You can find me on the Badge Bros on YouTube. Me and John Warner. You find him at Roto Run on Twitter. Streaming essentially every day over there at various times in the afternoon, covering all the sports strictly for Underdog Fantasy. So if you are thinking about trying to jump into the Underdog Fantasy DFS streets, we got you covered with strategy and player takes, all that fun stuff over there. It's a pretty fun show. If you haven't seen us yet, I would recommend it. I think it's a good time over there. But yeah, Liam, it's I always love chatting with you, man. It's definitely some of my favorite fantasy discussion when I get a chance to chop it up with you. So
Yeah, the Badge Bros, a must watch if you do a lot of underdog drafts. For me, I'm going to be diving into all of my advancing teams tomorrow on the show. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like and subscribe. Justin and Neil, you're free to go. Nez, you guys can hang out too if you want. But Nez, if you could just spend 5 minutes and tell the people about the Dog Bowl in Miami, I think they'd be interested in hearing about that. So if you could real quick just run through that and tell us about your experience at the Dog Bowl.
I'll just sit
what
here
was
as a
it? What
viewer.
happened?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to hear.
Yeah, I want to stare at your face while I talk about this. Yeah, so Dog Bowl was awesome. And if you're not familiar with what the Dog Bowl was, it was a qualifier. It was a live final. Qualifiers were held all throughout the season by Underdog. Top 3 of various thousands of players every week advanced, and you could win at max 3 tickets. And so it was very fun. They had us in 3 separate drafts, 12-person drafts, where we were selecting 6 players, 1 QB, 1 tight end, 2 wideouts, 1 running back, and 1 flex, half PPR, no frills. And so we go into this room, right? And they all have us in separate rooms, and then they escort us in because they don't want to share any draft boards or anything for this. And then, they put us in the lobby, and you find out your draft position and you draft. And top prize for this was technically 200,000, but 190 K in the app, what it looked like. So there's Carrick who won. I face him a lot in the Underdog Daily streets. So it was cool to get to meet a lot of these guys that I see every single day in these lobbies in person. It was really cool. I met a legend. If you guys are in the Daily streets, you know who Beretta James is. Finally got to meet Beretta James in person.
Which one is that? Help me out.
You're not going to find him in any pictures. He's off to the side.
Okay. Beretta James was very inspired during the Taysom Hill FFPC discussion. So
I could
but
tell.
He's a sharp drafter.
Dude, he's really sharp. And
Peter Overzet here.
Yeah. There's Pete. There's Norris. Got to talk with Norris. It was I will say, I didn't get the results I wanted. I came out with an extra 2K, so I'm glad I at least went over the cash line. It was tough, man. It was
Miami
everybody,
Ned.
so many people. Here. There he is on the production
this
set.
This needs to be your profile picture, dude. Take this.
You think so? Yeah. The most common comment I got was no one could believe how tall I was. I guess I look small on camera. I'm 6'2".
That's when I met Herzig in real life, I was shocked because he's pretty tall. He's yeah.
6'2". He and I were looking at I got to meet Herzig. He was there as he said, so it was cool to get to talk with him a little bit. But it was a very intense sweat, I will say. It was very, very much in-person sweat. I had my wife with me, and I wasn't sure how she was going to feel about the in-person sweat. She loved it. She ended up downloading the app, and and she immediately firing off a pick. I'm like, "What do you even know what you're doing?" Yeah. I thought she would not like it. She that was her first time sitting down for a whole slate and sweating it out. It was so funny. But she was a trooper there for that. And she almost she didn't. Let me just clarify that. She did not. But she was looking up Amon-Ra St. Brown on Instagram and was I'm gonna send this dude a message. I can't believe he's dropping all these passes, not know because he was my first pick. He fell all the way to 10. I think he was the cheapest. That was the cheapest that he fell in all the dog bowls. Yeah, so I had a Amon-Ra with Justin Fields and Cole Kmet with Keaton Mitchell and
let's pull. Well, I can pull
that.
Ned.
Yeah. Go ahead. You can go ahead and pull it.
No,
that was my qualifier.
The team that got you there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how much I ended up tweeting there.
You had to bury it after the L.
Yeah. I was very
What
very
was
disappointed.
The sweat like? Was it pretty clear early you were dead if you didn't have Lamar, or how did it?
It was not.
How did it feel?
It was not
But
very
you had a lot of
clear.
1 o'clock players because you did Chicago, Detroit, right?
Yeah. So I knew that I had
Yeah,
half
those
of
are
my
the funny
lineup. Yeah, dude. Like, imagine seeing that. So half of my team was in that Lions Chicago game, which like it almost worked
Did
out.
you stay up all night? Is that what this is? Did you guys party
That
the
was
night away?
that was just a great action shot that looked like we were partying. No, I did not stay up all night. I made sure that I had a good night's rest there. But like you could see there, I stacked up that Chicago Detroit game. It was like the third highest total on the slate. And Fields did end up having like a decent game. Didn't like separate at the QB position like like Lamar did. But
He was QB2, right?
yeah, I knew going in, man,
What
that I
time
wanted
was the draft? What time was the draft?
Saturday night. So we
Okay.
drafted Saturday at 7, like one by one, and nobody was allowed to see the draft boards. Like they did a really good job of making sure that like because there were people that had like multiple entries, but they didn't want to share that. They did because there was an information edge, like whatever it may be. You didn't have a lot of time to get that edge, but yeah. So
Yeah, I looked at it
yeah.
and I saw that like Josh Allen went like 109 in one draft, and then he went like 102 in the next one. And
I
like
thought he was going to
102.
go top 4, top 5 in every
I thought he was
room.
gonna smash too. He didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you actually did well if you took Josh Allen though, because you likely missed a landmine because there were so many round 1 players that busted. I mean, Amon-Ra busted, Chase, Justin Jefferson, Keenan Allen. So many guys fell flat on their face in the first round that if you like the guy that won had Travis Kelce. And Evan Ingram smashed on the slate. David Njoku smashed. But the guy with Kelce won because he didn't take a landmine at the flex positions where he ended up getting Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Drake London, Jerome Ford. Like, it's just the way that shit worked out. And I'm not like taking anything away. It was a great, well-drafted team, but it was just an odd week. And I kind of had a feling it was going to be an odd week. So I knew I wanted a good quarterback.
Cook was one of my favorite plays on the slate. I just thought the Joe Brady. I messaged you, Nez, because I was rooting for Nez. I was like, these are some guys I like. I don't want to influence you at all. Do it yourself.
No, I was in on the Bills, man. I was very much in on like that being like a must-win game for them, and I think that they're better than the Chiefs. So
what was your prep like though? Did you just do a lot of drafts just to try to get used to it? Like
I did a lot of drafts
like that versus like going in fresh.
I did a lot of drafts, and I was very intentional about like the guys that I took and the pairings just to get a feel for how I liked it. So like this is a very like I try not to like get too hindsight and like beat myself up over this, but I loved the Niners. And I tried out builds where I would take Ayuk and Debo, knowing that I couldn't get Purdy. And I didn't like the quarterbacks enough for it. And I have one team that finished top 10 in the goal line stand, which is like the underdog GPP version of 12-person drafts. So that's how I was getting my reps in. And it finished 10th with and I had like Desmond Ridder as the QB with Brandon Ayuk and Debo. Mm-hmm. So, I don't want to like beat myself up over not taking Debo over Amon-Ra because I was so in on Debo the week before and I like the spot again. But Amon-Ra,
it would have been pretty gutsy to take Debo over Amon-Ra, who has been one of the safest players in fantasy, and Chicago's like tough to run on.
Yeah, like I think any other week, man, like you would say Amon-Ra is a better floor than Debo, and like truthfully, I was going for floor. The top score in the dog bowl was like 119 points. That would have like min cashed in the goal line stand. I mean, people were really playing for projectable points. And I thought that the risks with Keaton Mitchell and Jacoby, like, maybe we're going to differentiate me if I could get.
These are two risky guys, right? Because like
super risky.
Keaton Mitchell was, I think, underdog chalk, but like he was not even DFS chalk, right?
He wasn't taken. There was only one other draft that he was taken in, but it also happened to be this was somebody that took Justin Fields. Like it was so weird. Like I ended up like getting like low key duped, but it was unintentional, of course.
Was Myers a guy you're into, or just the best wideout you could get? And then also like I really like your point. It's tough to think through. Like on that slate, can I accept the floor ceiling combo of just jamming Ayuk and Debo in there? And what's nice about that is on an ugly wide receiver slate, which it was last week.
Yeah.
Now you're done at wideout, and so it's like.
I kind of thought that that AOC had a chance to like have a good week with Jacoby. Like I've been a Jacoby guy all season. I've had nice weeks with Jacoby, and it started off
Always
great.
go
Like
down with your guys. Like if it would feel so much worse if he had a great.
yeah,
game
hence the Justin Fields Cole Kmet combo, right? That was, and James Cook. I've won a ton of GPPs on underdog with James Cook because people just don't like taking James Cook. But I thought Jacoby represented like a floor, like a low key like floor in there, and I mean it sort of came to fruition. He'd start off the game 4 for 4, but that game ended up being just an unbelievable slog. And then Keaton Mitchell, I was thinking the weather. I was like, okay, well, the weather's gonna be bad. They can't pass a lot. He's a home run hitter. They're favored by 7. Keaton Mitchell should have 17 points. I was like, I think that was like, I thought he represented a great pick in the last round where, I didn't want to do anything too safe. Like I wanted to shoot for upside in the late round. So, ultimately the biggest like regret is not taking a Niner there, but I'm I'm proud of the way I played it. I thought I was going to go way safer, to be honest, in my draft, but I would do this again.
No, you played for the win. Like I did. Like looking at your team, I was just like, well, you played for the win because, I mean, you took mid round tight end too, which in general is just kind of like a sink or swim strategy for something like a dog bowl draft where it's like, you're not taking a wide receiver there, so you're saying whatever. I'm not accepting K. Dotton or whoever punt tight end.
And Njoku would have been nice, but
yeah, Njoku, whatever. Like this is and like correlating helps you hit a ceiling easier, but it also puts more eggs in one basket. So like there's that risk. But no, I mean, it sounds like a super fun event. I could see it being like 500K to first next year, $1 million to first next year. I did not grind that many entries this year in the dog bowl. I don't know, time just got away from me, but I could see myself going way harder at it next year. The event seems super well done and fun.
They did. Yeah, I will say they did a great job with the event. The production team for all the content they did just like killed it. They did such a good job with that. Like our show like went off without a hitch. They did so good with that. So shout out to them on that. I will say just like from the live event standpoint, I think that they should do it again, and I think they will. I think they found it to be a great success. From a player standpoint, though, there are a lot of people that I know that grinded the dog bowl qualifiers and didn't get in, and like they felt really bad about it, and maybe they felt bad about themselves or they were just upset that they didn't make it. Like it's fucking tough to like qualify for this. So I don't blame you because like you can max 150. If you're trying to qualify for something this top head, for something that this is this lucrative, you probably don't want to auto draft it because it's also like $25 a pop for most of the year. So it's a lot of time spent for top 3 out of like a top 5K. So I mean, I don't blame anybody for not wanting to grind it. I'm so glad that I made it, but like, man, it's tough. I mean, that might be an obvious like takeaway, but no shame if you tried to get in and you didn't get in. This shit is hard.
Yeah, and I would do like 10 to 15 usually a week. Like I was trying because I thought it would be a fun experience and like a plus EV trip. But no, that's a great point. It's related to like the celebration on Twitter. So, social media in general is just people show the positives, not the lows. So it's easy to think like everything's going great.
Yeah.
I do think it really helped that Underdog basically made it like rake free by letting, if you finish 50%, you got your money back. And did you attack trying to get the second and third ticket? Because you won pretty early.
I did. And
you won like week 4 or something.
Week 2, actually.
Week 2, yeah. So did you like 150 from there, or how did you?
Did not. I did a lot, but I didn't 150. Because I didn't have the bankroll to 150, to be honest. But I lost, I ended up losing money trying to qualify for that second seed. I mean, I did okay. I ended up making up for it after the qualifiers were done with 2 back-to-back nice weeks on Underdog. But yeah, man, I gave it a pretty damn good shot. I did 40 entries at $25 a pop for like, I would say like 6 weeks. The ROI wasn't great, and it didn't feel good to not get that other seat, but I was just banking on the fact that I still had one. It's a tough on like the mental, because you're not just generating lineups and plugging them in. You are taking the time to sit in a lobby, wait for it to fill, draft. It takes like 15 minutes to draft this thing. and then, and plus the money on top of it. I mean, it feels bad to lose. That is the one. I mean, I don't know how to fix that from a business standpoint. Like that is
a reminder to
it feels
anyone
bad to lose.
Don't gamble. Because I mean, you didn't lose your
my shirt or anything,
your shirt or anything. And there are people that will go way overboard. Then you're saying you felt bad because you chased a second ticket, you didn't get it, and I understand that, and I relate to that feeling. I think many people do, but like anyone out there, seriously, do not overdo your skis here.
Yeah,
And
I started off with very, very low volume, man. Like it wasn't until after the Bengals-Rams Super Bowl where I split first for Mittens returns again. Everybody knows. And that's like what really got me started, man. I was playing extremely low volume up until that point because I didn't have the bankroll to be what I am like right now. So that's not to say I just like to say that, man, because I can relate to coming from a position where I can't max enter a dog bowl qualifier for top 3 out of 5,000. Like that is so that's so incredibly risky, especially for someone without the bankroll. So, just keep playing smart, man. Find your edge, play it smart, and eventually, like you'll get into a position where you can play the way that you want to play. I firmly believe that. I mean, this has been years in the making for me to be where I'm at right now at Underdog. So
yeah, and you do not need to 150 these contests to win. You could have done 5 bullets in, 10 bullets in it. It hurts your chances. I relate to that a lot too because I was literally a teacher before I won BBM2. And the first year I played best ball, it was like COVID hit. So I was like getting paid teaching kind of like they kind of just gave up on chess. Like I was calling kids about math and such. And then I was working for chess.com. And I just took all that money and put it on best ball, which is like not financial advice. And I did fine that year, honestly. But I actually I used to message you, Justin, on like my old Bills account or whatever, because you were in the contest with me and I just like noticed you on Twitter. But that was great, man. Thank you so much for sharing about.
Nez, I have a question for you about the event. Do you think that have you been to any DraftKings or FanDuel live finals?
Never.
Okay.
Two Gun was there though, so I got to talk to him a little bit about the experience.
Okay. Did he say which he preferred?
He did not. I didn't ask what his preference was.
The Underdog one looked pretty fun because I went to the DK best ball $50,000 draft, which was also the baseball live final, and I was in the area in Miami for King of the Beach, and like those events are kind of dead from like players are not like getting together and not like some people are.
I went to a bunch of the DK ones for a while and I just stopped trying to qualify because it's the same people every single time.
Really?
So I think Underdog is cool
one looks a lot of fun. Like people were playing basketball.
The Underdog one looked like you'd meet a lot of random fun people and it seemed like a cool vibe. I was curious, Nez, I wonder if next year they'll run some higher entry fee contests with like make it easier to qualify. Because
I doubt
like you said,
they ate rake on this, right? Like they made it. I mean, I don't speak for Underdog, but
it's a little confusing, Liam, and I don't really know the whole story. But truth be told, I think they originally structured this in a way where they accidentally were raking more than they needed to,
and way too much.
And then that's what kind of prompted the promo. I do a lot of work with Underdogs, so I don't want to really speak on behalf of that. But I think if you do the math on the rake, it actually did not add up to what was needed. So that's what prompted the promo.
Then they made a donation essentially. But my point is, I doubt they made. I think it's a cool thing, and it really depends how much value they get out of the commercials.
Well, I was gonna say the live finals for all the DFS companies, they're a loss leader. They definitely expect to lose money on the live finals, but it's just to build the community of people being like, man, I want to get back there. And when you're playing every week to try to qualify, at least in DFS, you end up just firing that lineup that you built into every other GPP as well.
Right.
So it increases net volume on the site, even though the live final itself isn't productive. But that's where I was not understanding Underdog's strategy with this one, because it actually takes away from other products. If you're spending time drafting on that, then you're not drafting other things. So it's not the same as DraftKings where some days when I was really grinding I maxed the golf live final a few years ago. And when I was grinding hard for those tickets, I would play showdown contests that I normally wouldn't have played just because I wanted to get in the qualifier. And then once I built my lineup, I was like, all right, +1 to all. But you can't do that on Underdog. So now it's like, I was curious to know, because I know, Nez, you're pretty tight with the Underdog crew.
Yeah.
I was curious to know if they thought that, like, what the strategy was, and if they thought from a business perspective it was worth continuing.
I think that they do think it's worth continuing, and I think they're going to think very hard about a way to create the qualifying seats. I think to make it bigger, you have to have more seats to qualify, of course, if you're having a bigger final, and doing different qualifying contests. Even though we are, I think it needs to be 12-person drafts. Personally, I think that is a way more skill game, but you can still do 6-person contests to qualify for a 12-person final. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that.
You could run a 5K buy-in 12-person draft and the winner just qualifies.
There was some demand for that. I think there was just concern that there wasn't enough demand. In my opinion, there is a lot more liquidity going into the site. We are seeing, like, these daily contests have only gotten bigger. Like, they fill 80K in hoops a night now, which is like a big deal for them. There's a lot. There's bigger players on the site now where I think that they could probably do higher entry qualifiers, higher dollar entry qualifiers. Because whenever I won, it was $50, and it was never. They only did that like one other time. But that $50, my winning ticket, that contest overlaid like hell. So I
remember that. I like the $50 one. Shout out the Pound. He was
awesome, dude. Well. Got to meet him.
I want to say first to answer Justin's thing. I mean, it's the same high volume drafters that are doing this. So it's like these people would do the battle royales anyways, or are not doing battle royales.
There was a couple that, like, there was one dude. I don't know if you might have mentioned it. There was one dude that was from the University of Auburn. He was playing pick'ems with his buddies. Like, they put him on Underdog, and he drafted one entry to the qualifier drunk and won.
Yeah, hers had mentioned that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then there's this other dude by the name of Baby J who only did like a handful. So there was like a really blend of like dudes that never played versus like grinders. And one dude that found out about the contest through like the Batch Bros show. He was watching us for baseball content. Saw that I tweeted about the promo, did 10 entries from his bed, wasn't sweating, was doing laundry, saw that he had 10K in his account, like dropped the laundry basket, like hilarious story, and ended up winning 35K. And he's not like a daily fantasy grinder. So I think that they like those stories.
And that's a huge bankroll builder right there. Like, that's like BBM for next couple years, 10 years.
Yeah.
And the other thing to answer your question, Justin, is I think it's Underdog knowing they can put on a better live event than DraftKings and FanDuel, and then also because they just care more, like way more, and also it could be beta testing for their ability to quickly get a live final going for something like BBM5. There's always been questions of, could a company turn around quick enough? You advance week 16, now there's a live final for BBM5, whatever, so I don't know. I think it's a bit of that. Thank you, BKS. You had a great year. Advance rates, brother. Good luck. Appreciate the kind words, and anyone else who says kind words.
The last thing I will say, Justin, is that like what I have heard from the other live finals from salary sites is that people clear out like sooner. Like, if they know that they're out of it, they're just like, you know what, I got no reason to stick around. They feel bad that they lost or whatever. Like, everybody stuck around for this. And there was much more of like a community the feeling. Cool. Like, it really was a success in that, from that standpoint. I would say
the last DraftKings one I went to for NFL, they were kind of like begging us all to stay, to be there to cheer on the winner. And then the winner wasn't even there. They FaceTimed him in, and he comes in on some blurry thing, and he's like, "I'm at the beach. Did I win?" And it was just the worst ending ever to a live final. Like, my wife and I were just cracking up. We're just like, this is so bad. Like, this is exactly the opposite of what they want. And they had some celebrity, I can't remember who it was, that was supposed to be there to give him the trophy, and And the guy didn't care at all about who this, like, they were like, oh, we have this Ray Lewis here to FaceTime you or whoever it was. And the guy was just, oh, hey, whatever. Like, it was just so bad.
Before the $50,000 DraftKings best ball, they were trying to film it. I've never seen that film. And they announced that the contestants have got like $100 in free tickets to the DK Millie Maker, which like who made
those
that
guys?
Who made that decision? Who made the decision to make that an announcement worthy thing that, hey, yeah, for drafting in the $50,000 best ball, we're giving you 10 tickets to the DK Millie Maker. It was absurd. Only I found it like hilarious.
It's just such a throwaway from the business. It adds nothing in value.
It's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna end it there. I'll be back tomorrow again to dive more into these playoff teams sometime tomorrow. Make sure you join my Discord, link below. Follow Justin, follow Nez. They're great guys. Peace out. Appreciate everyone.